All right.
All right. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the April 2021 regular meeting of the Mobility and Transportation Infrastructure Commission of the City of South Pasadena. Leona, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Chair Abelson?
Here.
Commissioner Dunlap?
Here.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Hughes?
Here.
Commissioner Liu?
Here.
Great. Thank you, Leona. And I'll note that Councilmember Primuth most likely won't be with us at all because I believe there are two special meetings of the City Council this evening, one at 5:30, one at 6:30. So maybe if the 6:30 one ends in time, he'll join us. But other than that, I don't expect him. I think next in line here, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Liu, would you do the honors, please?
You're on mute.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America
And
and to
and to the republic
for
for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Liu. Next on our agenda, item 1, we have general public comment. I understand there are, I believe, 4, Leona?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, would you please read those for us?
Sure. This is from Eric Wachana. It says, hello, along with some of my neighbors, I wanted to urge the city and this commission to consider a traffic study to assess to the impact that traffic on the 200 block of Orange Grove Avenue is having on the community. Over the past month, we have witnessed several near collisions with cars merging to one lane south of Columbia. In one instance, a motorist drove over the curb and on our parkway to speed ahead of another. The merging poses a great deal of risk to people utilizing the sidewalk, which our families and neighbors frequently use. Thank you for your consideration. The next one is from Craig Erickson. This is regarding the Ramona Avenue Neighborhood Traffic Management Plan Ad Hoc Committee. Oh, I think I'm going to save that one then for the Ramona. Do we have that on our agenda, the Ramona Ad Hoc
I don't think we
Committee?
do.
I don't think, okay.
No.
So, all right, let me finish reading that one then. I live at 1545 Ramona Avenue on the corner of Ramona and Oak. I watch every morning and afternoon as the cars for Holy Family line up down Ramona and cause traffic and safety issues in the neighborhood. I have reviewed the November 2019 traffic management plan. While it does suggest some reasonable solutions, it does nothing to address the root of the problem. None of these solutions will reduce the traffic flow. The root of the problem is all the traffic from the Holy Family drop-off. There also needs to be better enforcement of drop-off at the high school. I believe that the simplest and most cost-effective solution is to stagger the start times and take away the Holy Family drop-off, especially since 90% of the students are from outside of South Pasadena. That should utilize the 75 spots in their other lot. And then I have one from Sophia Taylor. I own a home at 310 Orange Grove Avenue in South Pasadena. My family has lived on this property since 1979. I am commenting this evening because of the dangerous traffic on Orange Grove Avenue between Columbia Street and the 110 freeway. This 1/4 stretch south of Columbia has for years been a very dangerous street in South Pass. Cars land on our lawn, take out light posts, broken curbs, etc. It's clear drivers cannot handle the curb heading south. I am always nervous when walking with my kids in front of my home. I am requesting that a traffic study be completed. Following the traffic study, mitigation strategies can be implemented immediately. Something must be done to slow down the speed of traffic. And then my last one is from Joanne Knuckles. This discussion at the March meeting about preferential parking hopefully will continue and be enhanced by a meeting with each neighborhood separately or together who have a parking district and find out the successes and failures. Without this knowledge from those living with existing districts, it's just speculation on the part of the staff and commission as to effectiveness of the current policies and what needs to be changed to make them more efficient for the purpose originally intended. Beverly Hills is another city, as well as Pasadena, that has an effective ordinance that serves the community. Joanne Knuckles, representing the Ramona Avenue Preferential Parking District, the first residential parking district in the city. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, Leona. Those were all interesting comments. I took some notes here. Okay.
Chair,
So
this is Shahid. Sorry, I lost my internet connection, so I tried to join on my cell phone. So
okay, well, we already took care of the stop sign, Shahid, so you're good to go.
okay, thank you.
I'm just kidding.
Yes.
Okay, so you're back. We just finished Leona reading the 4 general public comments.
Right.
So welcome back. So next
Okay.
up, we have the minutes of our last meeting, and Shahid has a time constraint. He needs to leave a bit before 7:30, and since he is the point person from staff on the stop signs, if it's okay with everyone else, I'd like to propose that we switch items 3 and 2 and take the item number 3, which is the proposed stop signs, before the minutes. Is that okay with everybody? Or put differently, does anybody have an objection to that?
No.
Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll move forward with item 3, the proposed stop signs. So I thought what we do is hear from staff first, ask staff questions if we have questions, and then we can hear, I understand there are public comments, and then we'll hear those public comments after that. Shahid, would you please take it away?
Yes, Garrett will briefly go over the report, staff report. Garrett?
All right, thank you, Shahid. So this is an update on the multi-way stop sign study for Meridian Avenue at Oak, Pine, and Maple Streets, respectively. So it's recommended that the IMTEC Commission receive and file the multi-way stop sign analysis update and make a recommendation to the City Council for traffic controls on Meridian Avenue at Oak, Pine, and Maple Street, or provide guidance to staff on how to further proceed with this report. A little bit of background. In response to the request by the residents of Meridian Avenue, WG Zimmerman Engineering Incorporated prepared a stop sign analysis for Meridian Avenue at Oak, Pine, and Maple. As the attachment is the engineer study on May 6th, 2020. The study concluded that the subject intersections do not meet the California Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or the California MUTCD, to meet that requirement for a multi-way stop sign application. And then recently, in March of this year, Interwest Consulting Group conducted a peer review of that original WG Zimmerman engineering study, and also validated the findings that the stop signs were not warranted at those 3 intersections. A second peer review was performed by Rock E. Miller and Associates, referred to as the Miller Report, where they reviewed and evaluated the traffic control needs on Meridian. And this report was dated April 13th, 2021. And this report identifies alternative criteria in the MUTCD that may be considered for installing a multi-way stop sign on neighborhood, local residential streets when in specific safety concerns exist. And that's from the MUTCD section 2B.07. And that is also spelled out in the report. It should be noted that Meridian is considered a collector and not a residential street. The section of the California MUTCD intends to apply an alternative criteria as a safety measure, but it may not support its application where there's no identifiable safety concerns. The following are the major conclusions. Oak Street at Meridian is based on a unique intersection's geometrics, the marked school crossing at the south leg, and the street usage further to the east. The report recommends a multi-way stop sign control at this location. Maple and Meridian, the report cites higher traffic volumes and restricted sight distance as a factor for installation of a multi-way stop sign control, while noting that sight distance is good and could further improve by painting additional red curbing, which would result in a safer and better operation of the intersection. And based on that conclusion, staff does not recommend a multi-way stop sign control at that location. Pine Street and Meridian, the report finds lower traffic volumes compared to the other locations, with the fewest distinguished factors for installing an all-way stop sign control. The report also in this area recommends additional red curb that would improve sightline distance, and giving those factors, staff does not recommend a multi-way stop sign at that location. The report also suggests that if the city chose to deviate from the California MUTCD warrants and installs all-way stop signs, it must consider how it might apply for other intersections in the city, as this would set a precedent, which would lead to the installation of many stop signs at intersections with similar characteristics. Therefore, the report recommends adopting new guidelines for installing a multi-way stop controls on residential street. The report provides no additional engineering data on existing conditions. And that concludes the report. There is quite a bit of anecdotal evidence in that as well.
Thank you, Garrett.
Mhm.
Shahid, do you have anything at this point to add, or you'll wait?
No, I'm good. So I just let you know, Chair, I have another meeting going on for the city council and they are sending me a lot of questions. So
Okay.
I told them, this is important. And if you find me get out because I have to use my phone, that would be a reason, So I'm getting a lot of questions from that meeting. I think it's mostly on the trees issue associated with that.
I'm getting them too, Shahid, so don't feel bad.
Okay.
Is it okay? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the heads up. So before we get to the public comment, I thought I'd check with my fellow commissioners to see if any of you had questions for Garrett or Shahid, and I see Kim's hand up. So Commissioner Hughes.
Well, thank you for that report, Garrett. Very, very informative. And I think it was a thorough report. When they talk about the concern about setting a precedent with too many signs, are they concerned about the fact if this sets the precedent that we need to again look at a more overall neighborhood traffic study for the city? Because if anything, I think some of our residents would welcome a lot more stop signs, particularly concerns of speeding, traffic, whether it's Via del Sol we've heard about, or obviously Fremont we know. Now we're hearing a lot about Orange Grove. We know that there are these points in the city where we've had many of our residents comment on stop sign or slowing, and one of the things they've brought up. So is there a concern about the overall flow of traffic with if this sets the precedent and people ask for more stop signs? Or is it their concern that we need to set a specific criteria in it, other than the state code for the city in relationship? And maybe our in-house expert, John Fisher, could also maybe shed some light on where this is kind of going and what the concern is that they're voicing in this report.
And sorry to interrupt, Garrett, just before you respond, Commissioner Hughes, if we could just limit it to questions of staff right now, and then get to public comment, and then we can talk amongst ourselves, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, go ahead, Garrett.
I'll take on. So I think between the three reports, this is unanimous. This report also is not recommending, is not justifying a stop sign to slow the traffic down. So all three reports are unanimous that saying that we cannot install a stop sign to slow the traffic. It's not meant for the speeding issue. So yeah, if we don't set a criteria, there will be a precedence where very many stop signs will be installed. And I can't really say that's a good thing, because generally we receive in the city also a lot of complaints where the people are not stopping at the stop sign where we have installed. So that's a tough call. I think it will be a case by case basis, but it will help staff if we have some kind of a criteria which we can apply to similar situation. And also the report mentioned about such criteria for a residential local street. Keep in mind, Meridian is a collector street. So the report is a little confused here once they talk about that criteria and refer it to the local residential street, but basing it on a collector and a residential street.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Thank you, Shahid. I think Commissioner Liu is up next.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Abelson. I just have a question for Garrett and Shahid real quick. I read the report, the third report, the Miller report, and it recommended developing maybe a city policy, a city council policy similar to what LA or Alhambra have done. But they did not provide any information on what those cities have done to, I guess, accommodate hallway stops outside of MUTCD warrants. Did you guys look into that? And is that part of the thinking here, or are we going to pursue something like that?
So staff did not look into that. We did not look into that. That will be quite a task for us to look into the guidelines, and we can look at that. But again, LA city's guideline may not be applicable. I think that's my personal opinion, because I drive through some of the streets. My kids live there, so I go there. Most of their streets, are in a condition where there are slope, serious side distance issues. So if a side distance is a criteria, that can be justified almost any street in LA, because of the urban development so close to the intersections, their hilly nature, and the undulating ground streets in the street. This is my guess. I think that was the major criteria to justify putting a stop sign, on all those locations. I think that the thing came up when the ways came up, the people started cutting through the street because the way will give them a shorter direction. I think that led to this criteria and having so many stop signs in LA. But it should not be studied in isolation. Once we study this criteria, we should study a case from LA, see if they have installed the stop sign at so many locations, almost every intersecting street in the LA. What did it? I think they have been doing it for quite some time now, 3 to 4 years, probably 4 years. I think we should have a sufficient safety history data available, which we should also look into that, whether it has improved their data, it has not, So it will be and mind you, we do have a program. We have a grant funding for a roadway safety program, and we plan to study all possible safety situation within the city, and one of the will be even stop sign or uncontrolled intersections.
All right, thank you, Shahid.
Okay, thank you both. Next, Commissioner Dunlap.
Thank you. I may have missed it in one of the original reports, but was any speed data collected as part of those studies? And if not, would you happen to know the 85th percentile speed on Meridian? So
the study did not collect any speed data, but our city study shows that posted speed limit is well within the state guidelines, which is based on the 85th percent criteria. Police department did collect some speed data a year ago with their own radar, guns, and we also use radar guns, engineers, to collect speed data for state as per the state guidelines, and their data also found that the posted speed is well within the state mandated guidelines of 85th percentile.
Okay, but do you wouldn't happen to know that number? Like, is it 32 miles per hour? Is it 28 miles per hour?
I don't know, but I can find out and give it to you. I believe it was between 25 to 30 or maybe 32, but I don't know at the top.
Thank you.
But I have that data.
Okay, thank you both. Oh, wait, I think Commissioner Dunlap, did you have, oh no, it's off. Okay. I just had a couple of questions, Shahid. It's really just about clarification. So just looking at your staff report really quickly, you have recommendations for maple and pine, but I don't see one for oak. Do you not have a recommendation one way or the other? And that's okay. I just wanted to know.
Yeah, this time we rely on the commission, so provide staff a guidance the way they like to proceed, and we are okay. Staff is okay with that.
Okay, and then you have an estimate of in the fiscal impact. You say the estimate's $2,000. Would that be per location or in total? And does that include any striping and pavement markings that would be necessary?
No, we have not included any. I don't think so. We'll have any need to do additional striping, but this is just the placement of the sign. So we're not asking any additional funding to place these signs, whether you pick one location or three location or none. So we can absorb this amount in our current operating budget. We may have to delay one small project for the next fiscal year, but we'll give this priority if that's what is eventually approved.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And just a last thing on the report obtained by the city manager, the report that you included, was it 6 pages or so? That's the entirety of it, right? There aren't any appendices or
No,
exhibits or anything with calculations. This is it.
No, there's no data provided. It's all anecdotal observations. So that's all. That's the complete report.
Okay, so as far as we know, he relied on the data that was provided in the original report. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's my understanding. He relied on the data which was provided on the original report, and he did some Google search around the intersections, and that's how he relied.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, thank you. First of all, regarding the costs, I'd like to point out that if Always Stop were to be authorized at Meridian and Oak, that the cost would be more than $1,000 or so, because you would have to take out the in-roadway warning light devices, at a minimum, the push button and such for it, and you would have to disconnect the wires to the embedded lights. So that would cost a little bit more. But I'd like to point out the contrast in the various reports we've seen regarding Meridian Avenue. On the one hand, you had the Zimmerman report, and then you had the peer review by Interwest, and then we get the Rock Miller report. And the first two reports were kind of numbers oriented. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it said, here are the numbers that should be met, or here are the warrants, and it didn't meet these numerical guidelines. Thus, it was denied. Then on the other hand, you have the Rock Miller report, which doesn't really cite the guidelines, but kind of has a narrative about the conditions that might justify Always Stop control, and the conditions you might look for and the considerations you might have. But it could have gotten more specific, and that's what I was looking for. And thus I haven't formed an opinion on whether Always Stop is justified, because I haven't seen enough information. For example, he says that motorists and pedestrians using cross streets will need to observe 6 to 7 seconds in traffic gaps. Well, what was the sight distance at Oak and Meridian? There is a curve on the north leg, but was it less than that? If it was less, then yeah, that could be justification for Always Stop control. And then he says, due to the unique intersection geometrics, the marked crosswalk and the street usage further to the east, there is ample justification to justify always stop control. Well, what is the street usage further to the east? I don't know what all that means. It's kind of ambiguous. And so while I don't yet support or oppose having always stop control, I feel that we need to dig a little deeper and identify how close the intersections come to meeting the guidelines, and then present a rationale as to why it should or should not be installed if it doesn't meet the guidelines. I can remember when we studied Oak Street, and it came a little bit short of meeting the guidelines, but there was a justification that it meets, and I'm just kind of going from memory, it meets 80% of the guidelines, but since there are school children crossing, you know, in consideration of all those factors, we should justify always stop control. So what I would like to see that would be more convincing to me is to see how close it comes to meeting the thresholds. And then if it falls short, create a good, solid, tangible rationale for why the always stop control should be justified at Oak and Meridian. And I'm looking for a little bit more than what I've seen in this narrative type of report.
So the report,
Go ahead. Sorry, Shahid. Go ahead.
the report does say the stop distance required. I think Commissioner Fisher is absolutely right, and I am sorry. I think he also right that it will require a little bit more money for the. And thank you so much for pointing that out. But we'll still do it in house, and we'll absorb that cost. You know, so we'll make sure we get the priority.
Yeah, the city's electrician and our streets team can take care of that. We'll
do that. So the study does say that site distance required is 250 to 275. But it does not give us what is the existing site distance. And that's the dilemma we have to decide today, which we will go. If you ask my personal opinion, I think the required site distance at this place should be greater than 275, you know, depending upon the unique characteristics. But that's what the report is reporting, that the ideal will be 250 to 275.
Right, but he didn't measure it. We don't
it didn't measure it. You know, the staff measured it in the past. You know, the previous reports have measured it in the past, but he didn't measure it.
Oh, then I have a question. And if I missed it, I apologize. So you're saying it's been measured, but not by this consultant, right?
Yes, it's not clear what is available to this by this one, right? But what I think that's not that. Yeah, it's not measured. The staff measured it. I directed my staff to measure it just to confirm it. What is the site distance here is, you know? So we.
So do we know what it is?
So it was more than what he's citing as an ideal site distance. That's why I said, no, we could have the ideal site distance should have been more than 275.
Okay, so what you're saying is, and again, forgive me if I'm missing it. What you're saying is that you've measured it and you think the site distance is sufficient.
I'm not saying sufficient. I'm saying what the report is reporting, that ideal site distance 275 is the ones the staff measure report site distance, not as part of this report, as part of the previous report. We found greater site distance than this report. You know, whether that's sufficient or no sufficient, that's why he said maybe the site distance is the required site distance. Our acceptable site distance is greater than 275. So.
Okay, so what Commissioner Fisher is suggesting, and it sounds like you're supporting, is that it would be helpful if the consultant provided a little bit more analysis with regard to the site distance that he observed and how that's consistent or inconsistent with what he thinks there should be. Is that a fair?
That would certainly help you and staff to make, to make a prudent judgment,
Okay, and I see Commissioner Liu has a question. Before I get to him, I just wanted to pick on something Commissioner Fisher mentioned, and Shahid, you mentioned. Commissioner Fisher talked about having to disable the in-roadway lights if a stop sign were installed. One other device that we've talked about in the past as a possible remedy for the concerns of the neighbors community is the installation of rectangular rapid flashing beacons at that location. And I just wanted to confirm with you that if a stop sign were approved and installed, then there would be no rectangular rapid flashing beacon, correct?
Yes, we cannot install a rectangular flashing beacon at any controlled location, So that device is approved by the council. So if you decide to go that route, we have the approval from the council. We just need to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Liu.
Thank you. Just one more thing, if we're going to be asking the consultant to provide a little bit more detail. I completely agree with Commissioner Fisher in his take of the Miller report, in that it kind of dances around the justification for an always stop there. And it would be nice that if they're going to recommend this, to provide a little bit more meat to their reasoning. And if we can we ask them to also dig into one of the statements that they make, but they don't analyze in some of the earlier reports, which is that they cite that under additional MUTCD criteria, which, we don't sometimes agree with, but they do highlight that, or at least this highlight may be done by city staff, but it is important to show that multi-way stop control is, quote, used where the volume of traffic on the intersecting roads is approximately equal. And this gives me a little bit of concern, because looking at the data included with the previous report, the first report that actually collected traffic data, it did not seem to me that the peak hour turning volumes on Meridian and Oak were equal. So I would want that the Miller report, if they were to elaborate on that and kind of show how this would not be a concern when this is one of the main guidelines around why you would have an always stop, which is the fact that the volume of traffic at intersecting roads is approximately equal, when I cannot come to that conclusion based on the data that we do have.
We can certainly ask that, we can certainly ask that.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunlap. And again, we're just focused now on questions of staff.
Thank you. Shahid, one of the things that you mentioned that you might be concerned with is the classification of Meridian. You said that it's currently classified as a collector, and I understand there's a process to work with Caltrans to reclassify a roadway, where you could work with them to reclassify a collector as a local street. It's kind of a left field idea, but I don't know, has there been any thought given to that?
Yeah, so we can, it's a simple process. It's not a complicated process, but imagine we need a collector street. If you need to complete the grid of the neighborhood street, there should be a street. We should collect the traffic from the abutting streets and dump the traffic onto one street, and then they can go back and join the arterial. So we need a collector. We have to have a classified collector to complete that neighborhood. And Meridian fits that criteria the best, because even if we declassify, the operation of Meridian will still be a collector. So there are two types of a classification, operational classification, and then is a roadway classification, which is based on the geometric conditions. So even if we declassify, it will still operate as a collector street. On the other hand, if there are other streets in the city, which is within the neighborhood, not necessary here, which we have seen, they are classified as a collector, which could have been easily declassified, and gone into a residential. And also, if we declassify a street, the funding which we get on the streets, and the projects which we are going to do in the future to upgrade the street, it can affect those, grants and available funds to us also.
Okay.
Because the collector will get preference for a project point of view if we want to do here than a residential street. That will not be our top priority under safety programs or roadway programs.
Yeah, I think one thing that the Miller report points out is that there are other local jurisdictions that, especially with the more local residential streets, there's a bit more flexibility with implementing multi-way stops. In some ways, like they developed guidelines that soften the California MUTCD requirements, because some of those are really difficult to meet, especially on neighborhood streets like Meridian.
Okay, thank you both. Commissioner Hughes, questions for staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things I saw in the report when we do look at the recommendations and comments regarding Meridian and Oak was obviously the crosswalk and students utilizing that. And the other was the ADA non-compliance. So I'm wondering if we looked at the potential recommendation of the four-way stop there, obviously changing, but if that would also give us the opportunity and what your thoughts are in bringing that up to ADA code.
So you pointed a very good point. That is extremely, because this crosswalk is not an ADA compliance and it's a liability risk for us. And a wheelchair person who can get trapped and get hurt will be no excuse, because if we have a crosswalk, it has to be an ADA compliant. But this has been there. I think staff and Commissioner Fisher was graciously extended his help to help us and make this ADA crosswalk compliant. So we are aware of that. And the previous reports recommends that remove these crosswalks unless they become ADA compliant. So that was a recommendation from the previous report. And that's why we sought help from Commissioner Fisher, see if there's a possibility, because this crosswalk leads into a driveway cross downslope, and somebody's driving on somebody's private driveway, coming back and suddenly find somewhere, may not be able to stop, and especially if the roads are slippery, inclement weather. So it's not an ideal situation, but I think the commission should recommend making these crosswalks ADA compliant. And we just need funding to make it ADA compliance, but it is very much on the radar of staff.
Because I would think that if we had to, this would just be my first thought, would be the liability and the consideration for the safety aspect of the ADA and potential the students crossing there potentially with a four-way stop.
Right.
Versus, I know we need to do our roads, but this might be more of a priority potentially. Just a concern.
Yeah.
All right, thank you both. Commissioner Fisher, questions for staff?
Yes, Commissioner Abelson and I went out to Meridian Avenue last week to observe traffic during the PM peak hour. One of the things we noted was that at Maple Avenue, you have a marked school crosswalk. And we know it serves students coming from up the hill on the east side. There's a steep stairway that comes from atop the hill on the west side, and it comes all the way down to the intersection of Maple and Meridian. But we weren't sure why there's a marked school crosswalk there, because there's no urgent need to cross at Maple. It would appear to us to be appropriate to not have students cross there, but to continue to walk on the west side of Meridian up to the intersection at Oak, where you can then get a critical mass of students crossing at Oak instead of a few crossing at Maple and the bulk of them crossing at Oak. Have you considered removing the marked crosswalk at Maple, not prohibiting crossings, but just removing the marked crosswalk as a preferred crossing point to encourage more students to use the traffic controls that are present at Oak Street.
Again, an excellent observation. Yeah, I think that crosswalk is also not ADA compliant. So at that location, but yeah, we considered that. Report recommended removing both the crosswalks. We just could not proceed further because of the community desires to have a crosswalk, But if the commission make a recommendation, we'll follow it through. But that's absolutely a great and a valid observation. And so it's a liability for the city also. We have a crosswalk which does not meet those criteria.
Okay, do we have any other questions for staff before we go to public comment? Okay. Well, seeing none, I want to thank the commissioners for the great questions and staff, Shahid particularly for the answers. And at this point, Leona, would you please read the public comments? Or Garrett, I'm sorry, Garrett.
No problem. I will read the comments. So we received, I think it was 11 public comments for this. 6 will be read aloud because 2 were late, past the 12 p.m. deadline, and 3 did not request to be read aloud. And I will only read up to, I think it's 150 words. So everything is fair. So our first public comment is from Susan Slusky. Dear commissioners, it is with great anticipation that on the agenda for the April 20th, 2021 meeting, I read that item number 3, proposed stop signs on Meridian Avenue at Oak Street, Pine Street, and Maple Street. This has been a long time coming. As a resident of Meridian Avenue for over 20 years, I sincerely believe that it is an important step to make Meridian Avenue a safer route for the many residents and school-age children that access these routes to walk and or bike to the high school and the middle school, as well as those students that cross Meridian to walk to Monterey Hills Elementary School. I am grateful to the Public Works Department for making a number of improvements to Meridian Avenue over the past year. It goes further, but it's beyond the word count. This one is from, and I apologize, Lisa Z. Zahran. I probably butchered that and I apologize. Hi, my name is Lisa Zahran, and I've lived on Meridian Avenue near Oak Street for 15 years. I am commenting on agenda item number 3 and would like my comments to be read aloud during the INTEC meeting. The community has desperately needed a stop sign at Oak and Meridian for as long as I have been here, and probably much longer. In my opinion, it is one of the most dangerous intersections in the city and is heavily used by children walking to and from school. The flashing lights are only effective in stopping cars some of the time. And since this is the beginning of a straightaway, people speed up or check their phones while they drive this area. A stop sign will make it so much safer for pedestrians and prevent a tragedy at this intersection. I also think a second stop sign at Meridian Maple would do a lot to deter speeders, and there are many in parentheses, and help pedestrians on Meridian. Please finally do the right thing and install these stop signs on Meridian. Our next is from Delane Shane on behalf of Smart Families. Dear INTIC Chair and Commissioners, Smart Families strongly support the installation of 3-way stop signs at the intersections of Meridian Oak and Meridian Maple. We are pleased that in his peer review, Mr. Rock Miller agrees with us. Mr. Miller notes that at Meridian Oak, and in quotations, based upon the unique intersection geometrics, the marked crosswalk, and the street usage further to the east, there is simple justification to conclude that all-way stops are appropriate for this location. For Meridian Maple, he states, also in parentheses, the high turning volume, sight distance limitations of parked cars, and the marked crosswalk are suitable justification to consider an all-way stop at the location, end quote. Smart Families also note that the neighbors, especially school-aged children who reside above Meridian on streets such as Oneida, I'm gonna say that's what that is, and Summit routinely access the public stairway from Bonita leading down to Meridian and then use the Meridian Maple crosswalk. There's more, but it's beyond the word count. Denise Filey says, South Pasadena City Council MTech, re-agenda item 3. The following comment should be read aloud. The first time I attended a council meeting in January 2020 to ask for the installation of stop signs at the Meridian intersections of Maple and Oak was in reaction to recent spate of auto collisions at Maple, a few steps from my home. 2 of those happened within a 24-hour period. There have been several more accidents since then. I've parked my car on Meridian for 6 years, and my home office faces the street, so I'm intimately familiar with the habits of Meridian drivers. It is common to see speeding, frustrated honking by drivers waiting for cars to park or pull out of driveways and side streets, and motorists blatantly ignoring pedestrians. Also, a frequent walker. When I pass or cross at the Oak intersection, I see cars breeze through the crosswalk, ignoring the flashing lights and signs. More often than not, it's a frequent source of complaint among my neighbors. There's more, but it's beyond the word count. This one is from woodcutcabin@yahoo.com. The same heading, South Pasadena City Council MTIC, re-agenda item 3. The following should be read aloud. I have lived on the 2000 block of Meridian Avenue between Bonita and Valley View since 2015. I use Meridian as a pedestrian, driver, and cyclist. To highlight the perpetual issues we face on our street, I have personally witnessed numerous car smashes, including 4 within the last few months on our block alone. Last year, I actually saw an overturned car in an accident 100 yards from our house in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. It's in all caps, but I will not yell. In September 2019, I was hit on my bicycle close to Meridian Oak by a car actually U-turning in front of me. This led to a life-threatening injury and hospitalization. In my opinion, all of these issues might have been avoided if motorists are forced to stop at Meridian Oak and Meridian Maple. There's more, but it's beyond the word count. This next one is from Joanne Knuckles, and requested to please read loud. We thank Mr. Miller for his recommendation for stop signs at Meridian Oak and Meridian Maple. We all urge you to recommend the same to City Council for the future safety of the neighborhood. The time is now to respond to all the comments and complaints and make Meridian a safer street for all and to relieve the neighborhood's anxiety. In addition to this last engineer's reasoned analysis and recommendations to MTech, former Transportation Commissioner Chair Hegelson, a retired city attorney, stated to me that other criteria for consideration is anecdotal evidence of safety issues and accidents. We all know there's plenty of evidence of both of those. Please make sure the neighborhood is safer and vote for stop signs Meridian Oak and Meridian Maple. Joanne Knuckles, sent from my iPad. And that is the end of public comment for this item.
Thank you very much, Garrett, and thank you to everyone who submitted those comments. And I'm trying to stay mindful of Shahid's time. So before we lose him, does anybody have any questions of Shahid in light of the public comments we just heard? Yeah. Commissioner Liu.
Thank you. Shahid, quickly, is there additional operations budget for other traffic calming devices, such as like quick build devices? I know the Miller report cites, if you're going to go build a full curb reconstruction to redo the ramps, it costs $50,000. I actually believe it could cost more depending on stormwater drainage and utility issues at that intersection, which there could be many. It's not the most typical intersection, but I'm just wondering, because I deal with it in my day-to-day job as well, is there a budget for maybe $20,000 to $30,000 worth of rubber or like modular bulb outs, chokers to narrow the street meridian, at that location to kind of, calm traffic in addition to the stop signs? Because I don't believe if drivers aren't stopping for a flashing light today, I don't know if they're going to be stopping for a stop sign when you don't see another car coming, especially at night without, great lighting at that intersection. So are there additional efforts that we can put there like quickly, as along with stop signs, if that's the way we end up going with this discussion? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, Shahid, you're still.
You're still muted.
Sorry,
All right, there we
sorry.
go.
I'm preparing food there and she's making a lot of noise. So there are a couple of options. I think these are good points. We can install choker. I think chokers have proved beneficial, and if we have a mid-block cross, choker helps reduce the distance and provide a mid-block crossing also. I think we have presented these options to the commission and to the council in the past. Permanent choker is expensive because the drainage comes a problem with that. We can do that. And smart chokers like installing a flexible bollard. I can look into that, and maybe we can absorb. And there's some other project which I can relegate to the future year. We can do that and install the temporary flexible bollards which can choke the traffic. So I can't promise at this point in time because the budget is already squeezed a lot, but I will certainly look into that. Other thing is, if I may say, you have Mayaram funding, I think is on your agenda. If you set some money out of that for a particular reason. So that's another tool available, but that money will not be available to us at least from a year and a half. No, if we approve it, no. I think Metro will consider this in July, August, then it goes to Metro. By the time we sign the contract, it will be somewhere end of next year. So I think that the other option could be in the meantime, do temporary whatever we can do, and then come back and make that a permanent feature.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I noticed, I did some research on some temporary items like modular traffic circles, bulb outs, diverters, and things like that.
Right.
And I talked to some manufacturers and cities in California that have used them. And the great news is that stormwater drainage is not an issue because they are built outside of the gutter. And I know the gutter at Meridian is weird, but it's permeable materials. Let's just say it that way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your help. I appreciate if you hook up with some of them or you have done it. So we'll open to every possible thing to calm the traffic down. At least the street should look like a neighborhood street.
Thank you both. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, Shahid and Garrett, maybe you could chime in. What we heard from some of the public comment had to do with a lot more, at least reference to accidents than was in the report. So I know I'm not sure if the accidents are more recent, because obviously the accidents that we are seeing in the original report was from 2020, because that would have been when they did the study and then they were looking at historic information. Have we seen, or do we think there's more new statistics? Because there was a reference to 4 accidents, including the one, the citizen that put the information in, whether Woodcut Cabin, said he himself experienced an accident with hospitalization from his bicycle. So do we know if there's more information where it has become more dangerous with these references versus what we see in the written reports?
So last year we did a review of the crashes along Meridian Avenue. I think we made a report to the council also in form of their weekly update, where police chief, his staff, and PW staff looked into every possible crashes which took along Meridian Avenue, and in particular at the intersections in questions for last 5 years. Not this year, but up to 22. Let me take it back. So I'm not sure it was up to 2020 or 2019. I believe it is 2020. So for last 5 years, so we did not find a crash at this location. There's one crash which is reported at this location, which is erroneously reported at this location. Basically, that one crash happened about 200, 300 feet further north, where a car was backing out of a driveway and hit a bicyclist on the road. But somehow the consultant attributed or reported this crash at this intersection. I can review a data for just to confirm it once again, because at this time I'm not sure it was 2019 or 2020. So I can confirm you later once I review the data. If not, we have the detailed report. We can look into 2020 and see what happens in 2020 if it was up to 2019.
Yes, thank you, because it just seemed that we've got more references here from these public comments regarding their experience with what they're seeing in accidents or experiencing in accidents versus what was reflective in the report.
So
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Shahid.
So if I'm about to leave, as you have to excuse me, but because of Ramadan, it's a fasting time for me, no eating, drinking from 4:15 in the morning till 7:30. So that's the time for me. So if I will make one suggestion. If the commission is leaning towards to beef up this study and going back to the same consultant and have him add the other data, I will be too happy to do it internally and make it every possible effort to look into all the elements. I think, and my gut feeling is, if we do it internally, we may come back with the justification that we have stop sign at least at the location of Meridian and Oak. I agree with you, the study is deficient, but don't push me on that. I am extremely short on staff. 2 deputy directors left, my associate engineer resigned and leaving, so I am the only one left with 1 junior staff. So as soon as possible, we'll do it, and we can offer that services, and I think we can do that. Instead of went through 3 consultants now, so maybe that's the best option for us to provide a reasonable justification for a stop sign at Oak and Meridian. So just keep a consideration once we make a recommendation. So we are offering our services. I think we have the capacity to do that.
Well, thank you, Shahid. Before we lose you, is there anything else you want to share with us, or are we good?
No, I think you're good. You got all the information too.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. You're excused.
Thank you so
And
much.
I'm sure Garrett will report back to you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so lots to discuss. We certainly have the initial thoughts of a number of you already, and I certainly have a lot to say, but I'm going to go last. So I'll just put it out there. So let's frame this. What I'd like to do first, if it's all right with all of you, there are a couple things we need to do. One is to receive and file the Rock-Miller report. And then second is to deal with each of the 3 locations. So I guess that's 2A, 2B, 2C. If it's all right with you, I'd like to get the easy administrative motion out of the way first. Hopefully it is. And that is to receive and file the report. So can somebody make a motion to receive and file the Rock-Miller report dated April 13th?
I'll motion to accept and file the
Okay.
Rock-Miller report.
Thank you, Commissioner Liu. So Commissioner Liu moves. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Hughes seconds. Does anyone object? Okay, so I think I lost Commissioner Fisher. Do you all see him, or is it just I?
No,
No,
I think he
did
dropped
not.
out.
He dropped out. All right, well, let's just go ahead. So we have a motion by Commissioner Liu, seconded by Commissioner Hughes to receive and file the Miller report. All those in favor, just if you could raise your hand, just really quick. Great. Okay, that motion passes 4-0. Thank you all. Hopefully Commissioner Fisher will rejoin us shortly. So next up is discussion regarding proposed signs, excuse me, at each of these locations, since we've already had some initial conversation, at least some of us, I thought it might be prudent. We can either do this two ways. We can either just go around and get some initial comments from people. Maybe let's do that. Why don't we go around and get some initial comments from folks on each of the 3 locations, and then we can talk about evaluating and making a recommendation on each one. So why don't we start? I'm just going to do it as I see it here, go clockwise. So Commissioner Liu, if you could just share your initial thoughts regarding the 3 locations, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So I read all 3 reports. The only one with data was the first one. I just want to emphasize that I live on Meridian. I actually live just south of Oak. So I see the intersection every day. I used to cross that crossing every day. And I am not, I guess I'm just extremely concerned about the use of stop signs to control this much traffic. 9,000 ADT on a collector is nothing to laugh at. I mean, not really laughing, but it's a good amount of traffic. And I want to emphasize the fact that stop signs do not force drivers to stop, just as the flashing lights in the crosswalk currently do not force drivers to stop. I'm concerned about the level of traffic on Meridian versus the side streets, because I know walking in the mornings that if there was a stop sign at Meridian, without additional traffic calming measures to really slow people down, if you're going north-south on Meridian, just trying to make it to this freeway, and you don't see traffic on Oak ever, I can completely see people rolling through the stop, and then we'd have maybe not necessarily a safer situation, but a situation where half the drivers on Meridian will roll through with the car that goes ahead of them. We see it pretty frequently in Pasadena at locations where drivers don't stop at stop signs. And I think that's just a general observation seen by most practitioners, which is that stop signs don't force people to stop. What forces people to stop are locations where they feel that there is cross traffic and a reason to stop. I think that's why even in the Miller report, it notes that multi-way stop control is used where the volume of traffic on the intersecting roads is approximately equal. That really does hold true in this location. But I do believe that an always stop here would improve some of the geometric deficiencies for vehicles on Oak. I just am not convinced it will improve pedestrian safety without additional measures. So if we were to go down the road of putting an always stop at this location, I would very much emphasize and agree with that this would improve Oak, or at least left turns out of Oak, but it wouldn't help pedestrians. We would need to do more in terms of shortening the crosswalks, using bollards to really skinny up the lanes on Meridian as they approach Oak, in both directions. I am optimistic there is an opportunity for that, considering that Meridian is red curbed just south of it, enough to put in maybe some sort of choker, even with bulb outs and temporary materials or modular materials that aren't necessarily concrete. And I agree with staff report that the stop signs down at Pine and Maple would not necessarily be as effective, mainly because the geometrics there are not as unique as they are at Maple. Those are my comments.
Great, that's great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Liu. Commissioner Dunlap.
Thank you, Chair Abelson. So regarding the stop signs, I think at Pine and Maple, I concur with the staff report. I don't think we have enough data for those locations to make a determination. However, regarding Meridian and Oak, and we might have different, you see 3 different reports from 3 different engineers, and they come to different conclusions, and we might all come to different conclusions on this commission. I think that's a location I've been thinking about for a while as an engineer, but then also really as a community member. And I think we heard some of the concerns of residents in the public comment. And I think it's a location that I'm comfortable concurring with the Rock Miller letter in support of a multi-way stop at Meridian at Oak. I think Rock Miller's letter does a good job of pointing out some concerns with the current configuration that weren't looked at in the initial study. Like the initial study didn't consider speed, even if that's not a warrant that you needed, like a box to check. Like it's still great data to have anytime you conduct any engineering study. And further, there wasn't a discussion of sight distance in the initial study, and I think Rock Miller's letter does makes a good point that there is some discretion left up to local jurisdictions. I understand, judging by what he says, that this is a collector. However, like south of Oak, it really feels more like a local residential street. And you've seen other jurisdictions like the city of LA and Alhambra in the letter, as well as the county of Los Angeles. They have their own criteria that often soften the California MUTCD requirements. So I'm willing. I think Rock Miller. I was trying to read Rock's letter carefully, and I believe it was to prepare a plan and for the change in controls. And I think it's not. Commissioner Liu does a good job. He did a good job of pointing out that it's not as simple as putting up a sign. You're going to need to remove the in-roadway warning lights and the PEB push button posts and look at crosswalks. And I think Commissioner Liu brings up some good ideas when maybe doing tightening with paint and bollard and flexible posts. And I think those could go in regardless if a multi-way stop is installed or not. I think I can also speak as a driver because of the acute angle. I did my own field investigation last week after work, and I sat there at the intersection and did some traffic counts to see what the volumes were like. And I know just as a driver, when I make a left turn from Oak onto Meridian, because of the angle, I consider myself pretty able-bodied, but it takes me a while to turn. Like I have to physically turn in my vehicle to look the other way, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for me as a driver. There was a large van parked in the first parking spot on the east side of Meridian, south of the intersection, and it was blocking my sight distance. Like I measured it after I tried to turn left, and I could see clearly about 180 feet to turn. And with the speed of traffic on Meridian, as well as how long it physically takes me to turn, because I had to physically turn my vehicle because of that angle, I think that's enough for me to concur with the Miller report that a multi-way stop should be implemented.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Dunlap. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you,
What
Mr.
say you?
Thank you. And thank you to my fellow commissioners for all of your input. Your expertise is so enlightening and helpful. A couple things. One, I would like to look at the Rock Miller report and consider sort of bring all of these elements together. One would be, I would support the four-way stop at Oak and Meridian. I would also see if we could explore and really make a good college try effort to bring everything together, meaning let's do some slowing and calming, as Commissioner Liu is suggesting. Let's improve the ADA that's there. Let's obviously remove the flashing in-road blink, light blinkers, etc. But also, I think the recommendations and the observations that Chair Abelson and Fisher had is maybe we do reconsider what's going on at Maple. It was Maple, correct, Larry? That we lose that there and get the traffic flowing and the pedestrian flowing over to Oak, but also take the two recommendations from the reports and add the red striping curbing and extend that to also what we have going on at Pine and also at Maple, just to help the flow of traffic and the vision. So that would be my recommendation, that we kind of do all of that. We look at the four-way stop at Oak and Meridian. We improve the slowing and calming and put efforts there for that location, as well as what we need to do the ADA and the adjustments that need to be made to the current configuration, and look at the recommendations for the improvement of the red curbing for the other two locations. And again, take the recommendation and flow the traffic, sort of stop this situation down on Maple and get that pedestrian traffic over to the Oak and Meridian location.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. This has been very helpful. I'm glad we did it this way, actually. Before I chime in, Leona or Garrett, have you heard from Commissioner Fisher in any way, shape, or form? He's
I
just
have not.
disappeared.
Yes, I haven't heard from him.
Okay. Let me just check my text to see. I don't see anything from, okay. Hopefully he'll come back. So let's see. So I'm going to share with, a lot of it's already been said, and I will try my best not to repeat, because I think all the observations have been fantastic. And there isn't much I disagree with. But here are my thoughts. So I have notes everywhere, but I'm just going to sort of speak extemporaneously, and hopefully I'll capture it. So first, I have to say I was a little concerned by the fact that this commission was not aware of the fact that the city manager had commissioned this report. I had zero awareness of it until I happened to be on a call or a Zoom within the last couple of weeks where it was mentioned. So I was happy that it was done. I was just concerned that none of us knew anything about it until most recently. So that just concerned me from a procedural standpoint. Second, if we take the locations one by one, I think there's a consensus that there's, even I think with consultant Rock Miller, that there's no meaningful justification for an always stop control at Pine. And I can't see one. What I did see at Pine, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes, is that, and I think maybe Commissioner Hughes mentioned it, is that lengthening of the red curb along the east side of Meridian to at least 30 feet north and south of the intersection is advisable in terms of visibility, turning off of Pine onto Meridian. That seemed to make sense, and should be something that staff can do or take a look at and implement if they agree. But other than that, it didn't seem like it met any of the guidelines or warrants justification. So, and I'm working backwards from easiest to hardest. And then Oak, I thought for quite some time justified an always stop. In fact, when we were going through this last year, I wrote a detailed email to Shahid listing these various additional criteria that could be used to support an always stop, which are the criteria that Mr. Miller actually looked at. So I appreciate the city manager engaged Mr. Miller to do that, because those criteria were evaluated and used, at least one of them, to support the always stop on Oak at Milan near Marengo School. So I'm glad it was done. I'm glad these criteria were evaluated. I thought it was appropriate to not simply go by the strict data-driven numerical criteria that were used by the first consultant. And looking at Oak, I think its proximity to multiple schools east of the location, the fact that the number of pedestrian crossings, it's quite impressive. Much of it's school related. It's a very odd configuration. It is very difficult, as Commissioner Dunlap mentioned, when you're turning from Oak onto Meridian to see oncoming traffic, in part due to the geometrics. So to me, the intersection is justified, and what I was concerned about there, and I think as Commissioner Fisher mentioned, it seems like we need a little more in this report to support it. In particular, because he relies heavily on sight distance, but there's no discussion of how the sight distance is inadequate. And he also talks about geometrics, and he talks about the proximity to schools. Well, that's objective. So my concern, so I'm supportive of the Oak Street. Oh, Commissioner Fisher's back, so I'll try to be brief. So I'm welcome back. Perfect timing. So I'm supportive of the always stop at Oak and Meridian. I agree with Commissioner Liu that it would be great to look into alternative or additional, at least to start, temporary devices to improve safety at that location. And there are other locations in town where those types of devices would be similarly welcome. And in fact, I was thinking that perhaps some of the, and I know we'll get to it later, some of the open/safe streets, $400,000 repurposed Metro grant can be used for these types of things, because certainly safe streets is what we're talking about is within that category. So I would support Oak. I would ask that Mr. Miller update his report to provide a little more analysis and data to support his conclusion. And the reason for that is not that I disagree with him or don't think it's there. It's that I want to make sure that it's more of a defensible, rock solid report. And so, you know, we do have to keep in mind that the whole precedent nature of all of this. We want to make sure we have sufficient support for what we're doing, so that every neighborhood doesn't come saying, well, our intersection is just like that intersection and we want always stops too. We need to have, it seems a little more analysis from Mr. Miller on that front, but I don't think it would take much. And my thought is it's something he could probably do in a very short amount of time and come back to us even next month, and perhaps, and then we could approve it then. Maple, as Commissioner Fisher mentioned, we went there, and it seems like from listening to the public comment and comments from before, that the issue is not so much conflict at that intersection, it's speeding, which we witnessed. I mean, cars do drive quickly through that area, that intersection and south of it. And I'm mindful of what's been pointed out before, which is that stop signs are not to be used to control speeds. So I had a hard time with Maple, and I know, you know, Mr. Miller mentioned, let's see here, he says 2 nearly equal residential streets. Well, I looked at the data from the Zimmerman report, and I don't think they're close to equal. If you're looking at traffic volume, if you look at Zimmerman's report, just looking at the AM peak hours, there were 717 vehicles on Meridian and 252 on Meridian. I'm sorry, on Maple. And in the afternoon, it was, if I'm reading my numbers right, it's 655 on Meridian and 257 on Maple. So I'm not sure how he concludes that they're nearly equal. And one's a collector and one's a local, as far as I could tell. There are a lot of right turns there, which is interesting because they're coming off of Huntington. And if they're not stopping, then that's an enforcement issue, but I don't think that justifies an always stop. And then he talks about sight distance limitations of parked cars. Well, as I think Commissioner Hughes mentioned, that's easily solved by adding red zone. And I think it was 30 feet on the east curb, south of the intersection that was recommended. I think that's appropriate. And that would certainly help with sight distance. So for Maple, I mean, I struggled because my going into this, and I'll be quiet soon, is I want to support the community, make every effort we can to assist the neighbors in getting the help they need. And we're certainly doing that. And I think the Oak Meridian intersection is supportable. And I struggled with Maple just to find some basis, but I couldn't find one that fits within the stop sign standards. And it would be different if the city made a policy decision, sort of like LA, I guess, in Alhambra, which is a much more flexible standard for installing stop signs in neighborhoods. Maybe then we could start talking about intersections like Meridian and Maple. But based on what we have before us, whether it's the strict numerical data-driven or these additional guidelines that Mr. Miller reviewed, I can't see how an always stop at Maple is warranted. And to me, like Commissioner Fisher said, the crossings at that intersection that Zimmerman noticed, Maple and Meridian, are quite low. I think it was 10. It was 10 total. Of course, this is the day he measured for AM and PM peak and at noon, and that's versus 41 at Oak and Meridian. So to me, to have a school crosswalk at, excuse me, at Maple doesn't make a lot of sense. And to me, invites people to get a false sense of security and cross the street where there's, really no protection. So my thought is at Maple that school crossing be removed, and that those people, as Commissioner Fisher mentioned, walk up Meridian to Oak and cross there to go to the various schools they're going to, because that seems to be what the little foot traffic there is there where they're headed. So that's sort of the way I see it. And I appreciate Shahid's suggestion that staff can bolster the report to support and always stop at Oak. But my thought is it's Miller's report that we're relying on, and he probably more quickly and efficiently can provide the additional support that I think maybe at least some of us are looking for. So it probably makes sense to go back to him. So at the end of the day, for me, it's a no on Pine and a no on Maple and a yes on Oak with a bolstered report. And then I would just say, to the extent there are speeding concerns at Meridian and Maple, that we look at other devices, such as the ones Commissioner Liu mentioned. And again, it's not just Meridian, there are other streets that have this issue too, that we can look at to calm traffic. The big challenge, though, is that as we learned last year, that the folks on Meridian are very needful of parking, and many of the devices I think that could be used to calm traffic would require removal of some amount of parking. So that's something that we need to consider and talk to the community about too. Okay, I'll now be quiet. And Commissioner Fisher, so if you didn't hear, what I was doing was asking each member to give a high level, and maybe mine was a little too low, but a high level summary of where they are on the 3 locations, and then we could take them each individually. So please go ahead, Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, and my apologies. I was having trouble with my Wi-Fi connection. So I'm glad you're still discussing this topic. What I was going to say is that one thing that I would like to see that would help me form my opinion is looking at the percentage of drivers that are yielding to pedestrians at Oak. We've expended funds to put in roadway warning lights at Oak. They've been replaced. Funds have been programmed to put in rectangular rapid flashing beacons there. If those don't work that well, then I think maybe we would have to consider always stop control there. So now that school is resuming, I think it would bolster the justification if there were data that showed that a fair percentage of drivers were not yielding to the pedestrians. To me, that would be a compelling need to put an always stop control, because when you look at the volume on Oak versus the volume on Meridian, it's about 5 to 1. It's not the near equal that we're hoping to see. So I think in crafting a justification to deviate from the traditional standards, if we had information such as drivers are not yielding to pedestrians there, that would be compelling for me. I would like Mr. Miller or someone to collect that data. The other thing I'd like to mention, if it wasn't already mentioned, is that I would like to see the marked school crosswalk removed at Maple, and to have the school pedestrians channelized to use Oak Street to provide that critical mass of students to use it, so that drivers would be more compelled to say, I need to stop here, there are students crossing. That's what I'd like to see in the report.
Okay, and Commissioner Fisher, just any comment or thought regarding Pine?
Fine. Looking at the data and looking at it in person last week, I did not see any compelling justification for it. I think we need to be careful where we put in all-way stops. There needs to be some right-of-way conflict. There needs to be something somewhat near equal volume so that motorists will be inclined to respect the stop sign, but I did not see that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've gone around and heard from everybody generally. So I thought maybe the best way to proceed is to hit each one of these locations one by one and start with what sounds to be the least controversial. Does anyone have a motion? So first one, I figured we'd go with Meridian Pine, Meridian Oak, and then Meridian Maple, if that's all right with you all. Okay, so we'll do that then, no objection. So does anybody have a motion with regard to proposed all-way stop at Meridian and Pine? Commissioner Hughes.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we do not recommend a stop at Meridian and Pine, but we do consider the extension of the red curbing as a mitigation effort for that location.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Fisher just beat you, Commissioner Dunlap. So, so Commissioner Hughes. Oh, I'm sorry. So I have a motion by Commissioner Hughes, seconded by Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Dunlap, did you have something you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, I have a concern about the implementing red curb. I just want to make sure that appropriate outreach is done to the adjacent property owners, since that will likely require the removal of parking. So that's certainly a need that needs to be balanced. So I can support this Commissioner Hughes' motion as long as outreach is done to those adjacent property owners.
Oh, thank you, fellow commissioner. I would agree with that. And normally we'd have to do I would think a community meeting and notification and a way so the community, the whole community and all of the Meridian area would know about the totality of all the elements together so that they understand the impacts that would happen with the actions for the 3 locations.
Okay, so I thought I had it, and then I just want to clarify. So, because what Commissioner Hughes said was a lot more than what you said, Commissioner Dunlap. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I mean, when you say community outreach, are you saying
the adjacent property owner?
Okay. So how about, and I'm trying to cut to the quick. So, and Commissioner Hughes and then Commissioner Fisher, make sure, please confirm you're okay with this. So the motion would be to recommend that the city not install a multi or all-way stop at the intersection of Meridian and Pine, and that the city install the recommended, I think it's 30 feet, but whatever the Mr. Miller recommended, of red curb on the east side of Meridian, and I believe it's south of Pine.
I believe so, as it's outlined in the report.
Okay, however, so the red curb that's outlined and recommended in the Miller report, and that the affected homeowners be notified. Is that a fair recap?
Yes, that is. I
Okay,
want to make sure that
All
we're
right.
not putting in red curb without reaching out to the adjacent property owners.
okay, all right. I think we have it. All those in favor, if you please just raise your hand. All right, I see 5, so that motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. All right,
Really quick, Chair Abelson, just for the committee's, the commission's information. Whenever we do install red curb, we always reach out and either send a letter if we can't reach them by phone or in person when we're going to install new red curb. We always give them that due.
great. Thank you, Garrett. And before we move on, I see a hand up. Commissioner Fisher, did you have something you wanted to add?
No,
No.
I was just, my
Okay.
hands to show that I.
Oh, thank you. Okay, great. All right, next up, proposed always stop at Meridian and Oak. So I'm just going to sort of start it off and then everybody please. So my sense is, to one degree or another, there is support. Is that fair? And perhaps with conditions or limitations or need for more information, but generally speaking, there's support for it. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. John?
I did not see sufficient evidence to support an always stop at Maple from my perspective.
Okay. All right. So we have a couple of options, right? One is the straight recommend installation or not. I don't get the sense that, and again, if anybody thinks differently, please correct me, that anybody, as we sit here, would support installation of the stop sign without something more, whether it's support or measures or something. Is that fair? Or is there somebody here who is ready to go? Commissioner Dunlap.
Chair, thank you. I'm willing to support the existing recommendation. However, if more, I'm certainly fine with more data too.
All right. Is there anybody else that's willing to support it as is without anything more? Okay.
I would,
So
with the in lieu of the fact that we have an ADA issue, particularly at that location and with the traffic at that location of pedestrians.
So what, explain that a little more.
My recommendation would be to move forward with the report recommended 4-way stop. I would add to that 2 other adjuncts, one being that we address the ADA issue, or actually 3. Then we have to look at the in-surface lighting and how that's going to be impacted, removed, adjusted. And can we explore and look at what other calming devices could be explored, as Commissioner Liu suggested, to deal with that totality of traffic and issues, pedestrians, bicycles, etc., at Oak and Meridian.
Okay, remind me, what was the first condition? There was the ADA, there was the in-roadway flasher issue, et cetera, and then there was something else. What am I missing? You're frozen.
Larry, I may be confused. I thought
Sorry,
we were
my
talking about
connection's not
Maple.
good. Yes, so that would
Oh.
be part of my recommendation.
Oak.
My thought would that we do the stop, ADA, calming, and then address the blinkers or the inline crossing markings that are there right now.
Okay, so just so we all know, the action item for us is
Can you hear me?
up, down, or something similar with regard to an always stop. On our agenda is not other measures. So I guess if we wanted to talk about other measures, we could recommend staff looking into that or something like that, right? I just want to be clear.
Yeah, that would be it. That I would recommend the four-way stop as suggested in the report, but I would also adjunct and say we would also recommend, or the staff look into these other related items, such as the.
You froze again. Okay, while Kim's frozen, Garrett, what do you have to say?
So if the commission's recommendation is to install a four-way stop at that intersection, as we install the stop signs and the new stop bars and the markings and everything, and the stop and head signs and all that, we would then disable the lighting, and then later we would go back in and actually take the pavement markings out and repave. So we can just disconnect the push button. It essentially disables the crossing, and we would then that would clear that up rather quickly.
Okay, so let's do this, because I was trying one method, but it wasn't successful. So, and that's my fault. So does anyone have a motion right now regarding Meridian and Oak that they'd like us to discuss? Or do you want to have more discussion first? Okay, so more discussion. So Commissioner Fisher, you were confused earlier. You thought we were talking about Maple. We're talking about Oak.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it may be my bad connection.
So what I was asking, was there a general consensus of support for moving forward with an always stop at that location, perhaps with certain conditions or need for additional information, that kind of thing? That was the question.
Yes, if there's additional information that's provided in a subsequent Miller report, then I could be supportive of it.
Okay. And what do others think about that?
I'll speak up. I concur with Commissioner Fisher. I'm already not convinced that an always stop, barring other measures, would be safer than the existing condition, based on the fact that we can see that the volumes are 5 to 1. We will have issues with drivers not respecting the stop sign if they are used to never seeing a conflicting volume coming out of Oak in the morning. So I am concerned about that. That's why I'm harping about additional measures to reinforce or to condition drivers to see the need to stop. I am also aware as a resident here that the lighting here at night at Oak and Meridian is not the brightest, and that's why I am hesitant to recommend the always stop over the existing working in roadway lights, which do provide lighting at night. So I would, for me to support the always stop, I would need more justification from the Miller report, and that would likely be in the way of digging into the unique geometrics of the intersection, sight distance and things like that, and the other conditions that he noted. But I just need, a little bit more.
Okay, so thank you. No, that's very helpful. So I'm going to try, excuse me, a motion and see how far it gets us. So let's see here. Because it sounds like where we are is we're generally in favor of the Oak and Meridian, but we want a fleshed out analysis from Mr. Miller to support his stated justifications. Is that fair? That consistent with what we're thinking?
If we go back to what we asked Shahid, I believe that Shahid mentioned that staff would look into beefing up that report, correct?
You're right. My concern, if I heard it wrong, please correct me. It wouldn't be the first time. I think what he talked about strained resources,
Mm-hmm.
and that it would take some time, and that time is not our friend on this. And I would suggest that assuming we're all in agreement, or the majority of us are, that staff immediately, like tomorrow, contact Mr. Miller and ask him, he's done all this analysis, I'm assuming, right? So he just needs to revise his report to include it so that we have the support, I think, that we're all looking for to say yes.
Yeah, I concur.
From what you know, right?
Yeah.
And I think Mr. Miller would probably do it more quickly than staff, given what I'm aware of that staff has to deal with on a daily basis. So I guess what we're saying is the motion would be, I guess I'm moving, that staff, that we're tentatively supportive, that we are tentatively recommending an always stop at the intersection of Meridian and Oak, but that in order to proceed and to finalize that recommendation, we're going to need to see a fleshed out analysis supported by data, explaining the justifications that Mr. Miller uses for the always stop at this location. I think he talks about unique intersection geometrics, the marked crosswalk, street usage further to the east, and I believe site distance was in here too. That what we're looking for, what we're asking is for staff to go back to him to provide support, data-driven support for those conclusions, and to come back to us with a revised report containing that information that we can then further evaluate and make a final recommendation. 2 hands are up, so I must have got it wrong. Let's see. Commissioner Dunlap.
Thank you. I would recommend removing the tentatively recommended, that language. I think that's somewhat confusing. And I think we would either recommend it or not, or we would concur with Mr. Miller's report. I think simply directing staff to work with Mr. Miller to beef up the report would be the best way to go, or how I would like to see us go.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing as Commissioner Dunlap. I would not say at this time we are favoring an always stop there until we see the data. As for me, I haven't made up my mind, but I think what we'd like to see from Mr. Miller is a compelling rationale for always stop control that would be based on the conventional warrants plus additional reasons to justify the always stop control, which would include looking at the percentage of vehicles that are yielding to pedestrians currently. To me, that would be a compelling rationale. And I don't know that that data has been collected.
Okay, Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also add if they could update if there's more current accident information that could be included if they're looking at updating and more data.
For Oak?
For Oak.
Okay. All right. So I'm trying to harmonize all of this so that this doesn't take another year. I think the community's been waiting quite a long time for this, and I would say unjustifiably so. And we need more information and support for a host of reasons that have already been discussed. I'm trying to see if there's a way that we're not asking Mr. Miller to go back to square one, which is what it sounds like Commissioner Fisher was suggesting, because I'm not interested in Mr. Miller going back and looking at the data-driven numerical warrants that Mr. Zimmerman did, because we know what those results are. It seems to me if the stop signs are going to go in, they're going to go in based on one of these more subjective criteria that Mr. Miller studied, or at least opined on, right? Sight distance, pedestrian crossing, geometrics of the intersection. And I'm just worried if we start talking about looking at everything all over and asking about accidents, that, well, I think I heard Commissioner Fisher, you said looking at everything. If I got it wrong, I got it wrong. But
no, I said one of the things we keep hearing from the community is cars are going too fast and people aren't yielding to the pedestrians. I would just like information, what percentage are yielding to pedestrians? If they aren't yielding, that would be a compelling reason to put an all-way stop control.
Okay, great. I thought you said a lot more than that, so that's my mistake.
Well, no, I don't need to see new volume data.
Okay.
But I just want to know, what is this? Is the sight distance adequate, and are motorists yielding to pedestrians?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, my comment would only be if they could like talk to, if we knew that the last accident data that went into that report was 2019, if they just talk to the PD and say, is there any more records you have of anything in 2020 without doing, I mean, internally, without having Miller to do it, but our own team maybe could pull that information internally and just share it. And we'd have maybe something a little more updated. I don't want them to do a whole study or do a lot of work, but I think we could just ask PD if there was any data. We could again find out what that accident data, what that year was.
Okay, so just so I have it specifically, you're looking for accident data during what period of time?
Well, it's not clear what years they were looking at. And Shahid made a mention of 5 years at one point. And then we saw this one, the data in here said there was one accident, but it doesn't say what year, when that was. And if this report was done in the, I'm not sure if they look back, if the report was done in they looked at this in January of 2020, when are they looking, then the accident would have occurred in 2019, I would guess. And then that would mean that we don't have data from 2020. So I just don't know if we have the most up-to-date, because the public comment referenced at 1.4 and at least one specific accidents, which makes me think we're missing something.
Okay, I mean, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just suggesting that I don't think Mr. Miller used accident data to support his conclusion.
I'm just thinking that that might be, if we have found out that there's more accidents than that's currently reflected, that's even more justification for potentially having the stop sign as we look at justifications and developing criteria.
Okay, so I have 3 topics that it looks like we're requesting additional information. One is for him to, Mr. Miller, to further explain his conclusions regarding inadequate sight distance. Second, to provide data regarding the percentage of drivers that are not yielding to pedestrians. And then third, if he can include data regarding, if he can include up-to-date accident data. And the period of time would, I guess, be based on his professional judgment, but current is the key, right?
Right.
So I'm going to revamp my motion. And the motion is to request that staff return to Mr. Miller and ask him to supplement his report to provide the 3 pieces of information that I just described, which I dare not repeat, and then to circulate that report back to staff as soon as possible for our consideration. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
Yay. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Hughes wins by a nose. So let's see. A motion by myself, seconded by Commissioner Hughes. All those in favor, would you please raise your hand? All right, I see all members of the commission raising their hand. So that motion passes 5-0. Congratulations to all of us for making it
Sorry.
through that one. I think that,
Sorry,
sorry.
really,
Yeah.
sorry, really quickly. I remember Mayor Mahmood had said, since we're on Zoom, we have to do a roll call.
Oh, thank you. Okay, then let's do that.
Okay.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well.
Perfect.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Leona. I appreciate the reminder. Okay. And then when we see the supplemental report, to your point, Commissioner Liu, maybe we can talk about those additional concerns you had regarding that intersection as well, and maybe additional things that we can do. Okay. So unless I've forgotten, we haven't dealt with Maple yet. So with regard to Maple, where are people? Is there anybody who is supportive either at this point or would like to see additional information in that regard? Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing. So my sense is that no one is supportive at this point of an always stop. I believe there were other recommendations, or at least one of them being, again, just like Pine, adding 30 feet of red curb on the east side of Meridian. I think on both sides, both north and south of Maple. I know when Commissioner Fisher and I were out there, I certainly noticed that there was a need south of the intersection for the red curb. Does anyone have thoughts one way or the other in that regard?
As long as you work with the adjacent residents.
Okay, so, oh, Commissioner Liu.
I'm gonna be a little contrarian here, but if it really is a sight distance safety issue, I maybe Gary can better speak to it, but I don't know if there is an option for the resident to deny a traffic safety concern or issue that is being remedied by additional red curb. But that's just me, but yeah.
I don't believe that you could deny it, but we always, I'll double check, but we always do let them know the reasoning for it. That doesn't mean everybody's always happy with it, but we always do make contact and try to work with the residents the best we can. But if that's the recommendation of the commission for safety, it's, that's what we'll carry out.
Mr. Fisher.
Yeah, one thing that we noted when we were out there is that if you add a little bit of red curb on the approach to section on Meridian, it would not have a direct impact to the developments because they front on Maple. They don't front, at least on the northbound approach, they don't front on Meridian. So while there could be convenience parking for them, their homes have a Maple Avenue address. So I think we can reach out to them. I don't think it'll be a difficult thing to do though.
Okay, so I'm gonna make another motion and feel free to correct me. So the motion would be to recommend that the city not proceed with an always stop at the intersection of Meridian and Maple at this time, that the city proceed with the recommended installation of red curb on the east side of Meridian, north and south of Maple, as recommended by Mr. Miller in his report. And then I'm going to add the third item that has been discussed, and that is that the marked school crosswalk at that intersection be removed. So that would be my motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Hughes seconds. Any discussion?
I'm somewhat disagreeable to removing the marked school crosswalk because it is an unmarked crosswalk, you know, and I think people take the most direct route when they cross. And I think there would need to be some sort of justification written for removing the marked crosswalk in case in the future something were to happen and there was a concern about why it was removed, there being some sort of justification in writing based on data.
Okay, let's discuss that. Does anybody have any? I mean, I'll tell you why. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Fisher, go ahead.
Well, no, I don't want to step on your toes. You were talking.
Please do it.
I think the rationale would be that most jurisdictions use a criterion of about 20 pedestrians per hour using a crosswalk to mark the crosswalk. Now, at most locations, an unmarked crosswalk exists, but you mark it as a special crosswalk, as a preferred crosswalk, when you have 20 or more. And I think the data shows that there's only 11 during the 3 peak periods of the day crossing there. I think another compelling reason is that there's no control on Meridian at Maple. So that would be another reason. The third reason is that you want to channel as many pedestrians as possible to one point so that, again, you have that critical mass at Oak, so that motorists will recognize this is a location where there are regular vehicles crossing and there's regular pedestrian activity, where they'll be more inclined to yield to pedestrians if we retain the current form of control, or stop for pedestrians if we put in always stops there. So again, if we remove the marked crosswalk at Maple, there would still be an unmarked crosswalk. The only difference would be that we're not identifying it as a preferred crossing point. That would be my rationale.
And I'll just supplement that by mentioning that looking at the Zimmerman report data, counts were taken on Wednesday, January 22nd. So that was a couple of months before the shutdown occurred. And between the AM peak hour, the PM peak hour, and the noon hour, the total crossings at that intersection across Meridian at Maple were 10. So it's a pretty low number. You know, I guess the three of us who were on a prior commission, we recommended the removal of other crosswalks. One in particular, I remembered, Fair Oaks, I think it was Linden, I can't remember, where there were crosswalks accessible not far away that served the same purpose. And we were concerned about where you have a marked crosswalk, you're inviting folks to cross, but there's no protection for them. And that's what concerns me, is that if we mark a crosswalk, we're sort of, it seems to me, we're suggesting that you have some level of protection or safety, or right, or this is a route you should take. And I sure don't think it is, in light of the fact that there's no control at the intersection, the large number of vehicles. So that's sort of where we were coming from. I don't know if that helps you at all, Commissioner Dunlap. Oh, Commissioner Lewis raised his hand, so let's go to him.
I think we're all on the same page here. From what I think I agree with Commissioner Dunlap in that we just need to document it. I think our reasons are good for the reasons that Commissioner Fisher and Chair Abelson just pointed out. I think it just makes sense to document it in case this ever becomes a question. And you guys outlined, these very good reasons for why there shouldn't be a marked crosswalk here. I see Garrett with his hand up.
Just,
Garrett.
but sorry, before we make a final motion on this one, I made an error. The public comment is limited to 250 words, so I do need to read the rest of those. So I can either read them all again in their entirety, or I can give you a brief update and then read the remaining words that I missed.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. And I'm glad you did. And I'm okay with your second option if everybody else is, because I took notes as you were reading them. So I'm familiar with at least the start of them.
Okay.
Is that all right with everybody? Okay. So we'll put a pin in our motion and discussion and let Garrett proceed.
All right. So I apologize. From Susan Slusky, she was the first commenter, and I left off at, however, there is no question that for a variety of reasons and rationales, Meridian Avenue has not been earmarked for substantial improvements. The stop signs will enhance the work that was begun by Public Works Department and can be the beginning of other opportunities to enable safe access for all users. From Lisa, that one was read in its entirety. And then this one from Delane Shane, I ended off at, overall, we worry about our children's safety in crossing Meridian while walking to or from either the high school or the middle school now that the hybrid learning has begun. Please recommend to the City Council that these two intersections receive three-way stop signs for the safety of our residents who walk, bike, and drive on Meridian. And just to kind of sum it up, she was recommending Meridian and Oak and Meridian and Maple. Denise, Meridian Avenue is simply not safe. A residential street frequented by dog walkers, school children, parents with strollers, and motorists who have no impetus to slow for any of them. The best, most direct way to control the flow of traffic here is to force drivers to come to a full stop every few blocks, just like traffic is controlled on Marengo. You can't speed on Marengo. You shouldn't be able to speed on Meridian. Thank you. And then from Woodcut Cabin, whilst the city's effort at Meridian Oak are appreciated, we are still experiencing speeding motors at every hour of the day as they cut through between Monterey and Kendall. And those motors show no signs of slowing. In fact, as I drive along Meridian intentionally at 25, as I drive along Meridian intentionally at 25 miles per hour, I am often usually tailgated by someone trying to pass me at unreasonable speeds. It is very clear that these behaviors will not change until action is taken by the city to force drivers to make a full and complete stop at those mentioned key junctions on our avenue. It's my hope that the residents' testimonies and experience will finally result in action that will enable real change. And then Joanne Knuckles was also read aloud. So I apologize for the mistake.
So we're good now? We're caught up with?
Yes, sir.
Garrett? Okay, thank you. So thank you for that. And thank you for the catch. Question for the group. If we're going to proceed with recommending removal of that crosswalk, the data we're using, okay, are counts taken during 3 hours on one particular day, period. I'm wondering if that's sufficient or if we need something more to support removing the crosswalk. Because what I'm thinking of doing, and then I'll be quiet, is dropping that last piece of my motion. So it would just be recommending not proceeding with an always stop at Meridian and Maple at this time, and recommending implementing the red curb removal measures proposed by Mr. Miller in his report, period. And then we can further evaluate removal of the crosswalk. That's what I'm sort of thinking about. What do you all think? Commissioner Liu.
Chair Abelson, just a quick clarification. In the Zimmerman report, pedestrian counts were actually taken for a full, let me look at this. doing
Maybe I'm
some
looking at the
math.
wrong page.
I'm looking at page 42. There's actually 2 hours in the AM, 2 hours midday, and they did a full 4-hour PM. So that's a full 8-hour count actually of pedestrians in case there were desires for more pedestrian data.
Okay, and so what's the total number he has for that entire 8-hour period?
Sorry, I'm adding up the lines. My head. Across the north leg, 4 plus 4, 8 plus 11, 20. No, 19. How am I doing? Oh my gosh.
So here, I'm going to interrupt you, and I apologize. So here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm thinking. We're going to see a supplemental report from Mr. Miller with regard to Meridian and Oak. My thought is that perhaps when we see that, and hopefully it's next month, that we also have on the agenda the proposed removal of this particular crosswalk. Then it will be, not only will there be more time to review the data, but it will also give folks who were not aware that this was specifically going to be discussed tonight notice that this is being considered, and they can submit comment, and we'll have a fuller discussion and analysis. Is that acceptable to you all? Commissioner Fisher. Sorry, Commissioner Hughes, I missed you. You'll be next. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one thing about that is, if we're asking for justification, maybe as we ask the Rockmiller team to add more data and justification, et cetera, maybe the comment that they also could address that, and to sort of see if that, and I would assume it might, support Commissioner Fisher's comments about, and yours, about creating more volume at Oak and Meridian to again have that beef up the experience that occurs there, that might again earmark and signal that that is a crossing, and more attention to that location and more justification, if that makes sense. That could be asked if they can do that at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I support what you want to do, not to make a decision tonight to remove the marked crosswalk, but to either have staff or Mr. Miller develop a rationale or an analysis of the justification for removal of the marked school crosswalk. I would like to handle both of those matters at the same meeting.
Okay, so I'm going to break my motion up into two just to keep things simple. So the first motion is that the commission recommend that the city not proceed with an all-way stop at the intersection of Meridian and Maple at this time, and that the city implement the proposed additional red curb set forth in Mr. Miller's report at that location. That's the motion. And then I'll make a separate one on the other issue, if that's okay. Do I have a second for that?
I will second.
Okay, Commissioner Hughes, any further discussion on that particular item? Okay, all right. Per Leona's directive, I will call roll. Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap.
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. And we didn't specifically put it in the motion, but that's with the understanding that Garrett gave us a few minutes ago, that staff provides outreach to the affected neighbors when it takes such action. So, okay. And then the next motion is to ask staff to have Mr. Miller review the potential removal of the marked crosswalk at Meridian and Maple. Is there anything else that anyone wants to have included in that motion? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Fisher seconds. Any discussion? Okay, we'll go around here. Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. And again, once we have Mr. Miller's thoughts on that, then that will be agendized as well. Okay, well, I think we have navigated through the stop sign issue, at least for now. And I think we're headed in the right direction, and I know it's a painful process, not only for us, but the community. But I think it's important that not only for the community and Meridian, but for future requests and locations that we do this the way we're suggesting, and hopefully it's one that can happen expeditiously, because I know people are waiting and they could use the help. So
And then Larry, just before we move on, just for my own clarification, I just want to go through those motions and make sure I'm going to proceed in the right direction, because I know time is sensitive on these matters. So if anyone would mind, so for Meridian and Pine, we're not recommending the stop sign, but to add the red curb based on the Miller report with the outreach to the residents that are affected by the potential parking loss. Meridian and Oak, we want to go back to Miller and ask for, if he has any anecdotal or any evidence about how many cars are not yielding to pedestrians, and then the most recent accident information, and just to further explain kind of what those sight distance inadequacies and some of those other things were. And then Meridian and Maple, do not install the stop sign, but add the red curb, just like in the other Pine, but then we're reviewing the idea and getting some more data about removing the crosswalk at Maple. That's the short and skinny of it, as I understand it. Okay.
yes.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. I appreciate the
Yes.
confirmation. I just want to make sure I'm moving in the right direction tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think, okay, so we're all on the same page. That's good, and
Thank
I
you. Thank you
appreciate
for
your
indulging
hopping
me.
on it. Absolutely. If any questions come up, just let me know. And but I think we have it now. So then we have to go back. So thank you all for that. I think that was a great discussion. Moving back to item 2, which our other action of the item of the evening, which is the minutes. So I think Leona circulated my proposed revisions, as well as, let's see, Mr. Fisher's, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Have people had a chance to look at them? And if not, please do. And I can give you some time, and then we can talk about any comments or edits. I'm just taking a moment to review Mr. Commissioner Fisher's. So I'm just a point of clarification, Commissioner Fisher. So your suggested text would replace what's currently in number 7? completely? And you're on mute, just as a reminder.
Yeah, sorry about that. It would replace that second paragraph.
Okay, so the first paragraph would stay as is, subject to my revisions. And the second paragraph would be replaced with your new second and third paragraphs, essentially. Is that
Yes.
okay? Okay, and then there was just, and then we can hear if anybody has further thoughts, comments. I had a question on number 6. And this is in the agenda pack, the minutes in the agenda pack. The third line, well, it's actually starts at
Wayfinding.
I'm sorry?
Wayfinding.
That
WAYFIN.
makes a lot more sense. Leona, did you get that?
I did.
So instead of weight lining, it would be wayfinding signage. Thank you. I could not figure that one out. Okay. So any discussion about the suggested revisions? Any further corrections, comments to the draft minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain, I've done enough moving for tonight, so I'll entertain a motion from someone to adopt the minutes as revised. Commissioner Hughes.
Yes, I would recommend the minutes from the March meeting be approved with the amended changes as outlined in the compilation of suggested changes from my fellow commissioners.
Second.
Okay, and just to be clear, those are edits from Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Dunlap, and myself, correct? Okay, just wanted to clarify. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No? Okay, roll call. I'm going to go the opposite way this time. Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap.
Yes.
Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
Okay, and I say yes as well. So the minutes are approved as amended. Thank you all for that. Okay. So next up, we move on to commission-led discussion. Let's see, item 4 is the SR 710 Mobility Improvement Projects Ad Hoc Committee, which is Commissioner Fisher and myself. Commissioner Fisher may have something. I'll just say that we are awaiting a draft scope from Shahid for the study of the SR 110 and Fair Oaks interchange. And that's all I have. Commissioner Fisher, anything further?
The only other thing I would add is that last week I had a Zoom meeting with the firm HNTV or Yoga Chandra, who on a pro bono basis developed an engineering scaled plan of the loop ramp design concept. And we discussed some tweaks and minor alterations to it that we believe might make it more acceptable to Caltrans as we go through their design process and their exception process. So we had an informal meeting that would make some slight modifications to the design. Again, it's informal. It hasn't been distributed yet, but it can be at some time in the future.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move along. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to express thanks to Commissioner Fisher and to yourself for taking on this task and for being so diligent, and particularly Commissioner Fisher for having the vision and again, staying on this. It's so important to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving along, item 5 is the COVID-19 Ad Hoc Committee, which includes the Metro Open Streets Grant. Commissioner Liu or Commissioner Dunlap?
Thanks, Chair. I'll give an update. So we have been meeting with Active SGV weekly and providing updates and input on the current scope of work. We work with them for on a preliminary scope as well as cost estimates, which will likely be presented to council sometime in May. The latest scope currently includes bollards for the farmers market. We felt that the city may not, that we need like an interim closure, so bollards not just around the perimeter of the farmers market, but then an interim set that would allow you just to be able to close Meridian between El Centro and Mission. So working with him on that, you know, the current project scope includes a potential reconfiguration of Mission Street as is. In addition, not as is, like the scope includes that, not the configuration is as is. In addition, you know, we recommended that necessary engineering plans be scoped out to as part of this project. We've also encouraged a portion of the budget go to a before and after study to identify speed, volume, travel time impacts on Mission Street, as well as the surrounding residential streets. And, you know, finally, working with Active SGV on the implementation of a slow streets program. So that's somewhat of an update of what we've been talking about over the past 3 or 4 weeks. Donson, do you have anything to add?
Nope, that sounds like got it all.
Great. Well, that's terrific. It sounds like you're making some good progress. That's wonderful. Do any of the other members of the commission have any questions or comments for Commissioners Dunlap or Liu? Okay, so I'll just ask. So my understanding is that this repurposed grant is something along the lines of 400,000. Does that sound correct? I think that's what we were told at the last meeting. Do you guys know?
I'd have to double check that number. It sounds correct-ish, but don't quote me on that.
Okay. And
Looking it up right now.
what's that?
I'm looking it up right now. Based on
Oh, okay. Okay. I just want to get a sense. I don't need it to the penny. I wanted to confirm that's what I had heard. And then is there an understanding of the allocation of those funds? I mean, I know council has to make the call, but is there an understanding in your conversations as to how much of that money is for the open streets component, which is a lot of what you talked about, bollards, Mission Street,
Yes.
Farmers Market, that kind of thing, versus safe streets?
Yes, and that's something we've been working with Wes closely on. Just Commissioner Liu and I having worked on some of these types of programs at our respective agencies, beefing up the cost estimate in some categories and saying, hey, you might not need this money and others. But right now, you know, the budget's still preliminary, but as we've seen it so far, it is broken apart by slow streets and then outreach and how a reconfiguration and those different types of components.
So I would say that's great. And I would suggest that when you've arrived at something, you're close to arriving at something that is to be presented to council, that you share it with us and have us weigh in, support, whatever, because I know when it goes to council, they're going to want to know, well, did MTIC review it and what did they have to say, right? I mean, you're part of MTIC and an important part, but I think it's something that I think all of us want to review and weigh in on. So whenever you think that makes sense. What do you guys think about that?
I think, were you going to say something, Dodson?
Oh, no, I think that makes sense. I
Yeah.
think it's a good idea. Yeah.
I think so. I think we'll work with planning staff, who I think is currently, who is out a little bit, but who's back, who has been working with Wes on it. And maybe we'll try to figure out when, when it's scheduled to go to council, and work with them to allow us some time to provide an update. We certainly don't want to hold up the funding or the project. But yes, we'll take that back and see. Hopefully we can do that and still meet the project schedule.
Okay, thanks. And I know Commissioner Hughes has a question, but the staff member you're referencing, is that Margaret Lynn?
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Okay. Okay, great. Commissioner Hughes.
I just had a question for Johnson or Eric. Could some of the money potentially for the Safe Streets aspect be utilized to address some of the issues we might have related to the Meridian question, such as ADA, such as the removing of the crosswalk, or calming devices that Commissioner Liu mentioned? Is that possible?
I think, I don't want to speak for Wes because he knows the grant funding and I guess the allocations and what's reimbursable better than I do. But I am under the impression that these are quick build projects. So some of the longer term improvements like ADA curb ramp reconstruction may not fall under that, but we can ask him at our next meeting, which is weekly, so next week. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Hughes. That's a great question, because that's what I was trying to allude to earlier when we were talking about the stop signs, is that my understanding of the slow/safe streets funds are available to use for not only, putting slow signs in the middle of a street at an intersection, but as Commissioner Liu mentioned, implementing quick build type projects to help calm traffic and improve safety on residential streets. So, and some of the temporary things that Commissioner Liu mentioned, and I'm thinking of, involve temporary striping and bollards. I think Commissioner Dunlap talked about it too earlier. Those would seem to be things that could be funded by this money, but yeah, if you guys could go back and just confirm it one way or the other.
Yeah, I think we can certainly get more information on that. I will say that sometimes when you implement things like paint and bollards, it might trigger a level of engineering studies or plans needed, like some sort of plan that's stamped by an engineer. So I don't know if that might increase the cost of it, but we can work with Wes to see what's possible.
That'd be great. And just, I think one of you mentioned either tonight or at a prior meeting that you've been involved. Our city really hasn't done it, at least not yet, but I know other towns, especially, in the middle of the pandemic crisis, which hopefully we're on the better side of, cities were implementing quick build, calming type measures. Has either of you been involved or in those types of projects previously in your jurisdictions?
No, unfortunately, not before COVID. No.
As part of
I was just say, seems like during COVID that cities were rapidly, without a lot of detailed and time-consuming planning and engineering, were implementing what were designed to be temporary measures, maybe partly as demonstrators to see if they would work. So I was just trying to get the sense of whether that was something you guys have been involved in. Sorry if I wasn't clear.
Yeah, I mean, we still do the studies, I think, regardless of the duration of the project. Usually these don't take too long. They're just kind of in-house, making sure that the striping plans make sense, that there's a traffic control plan. These things would be required regardless of the scope of the project or the duration of the demonstration.
Thank you. Commissioner Dunlap, did you want to I want to make sure you had a chance to say
I
something.
think I've certainly been involved as part of demonstration projects as well as these paint and bollard type installations, but not necessarily as part of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. More involved, probably like Donson was with the signs, the slow street signs. I know a lot of jurisdictions where we're closing streets and making them totally open streets as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. Oakland did a significant amount of that. There was some pushback from the surrounding community that felt like the proper outreach wasn't done as part of that, and their perspectives really weren't taken into account. I think New York City, and certainly these more progressive cities are definitely doing more in that area as far as closing streets or taking away car lanes to increase like walking and biking. So I've seen a ton of that at presentations, and probably Donson has too, but certainly not. I haven't been involved directly in that as part of the COVID-19 response.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Liu?
Yeah, I want to clarify that I didn't want to make it seem like there's onerous amounts of preparation that need to be done for some of these demonstrations. Actually, just thinking about it, some of the bollard demonstrations that are being done in Old Town Pasadena were just done based on a striping plan that's probably not nearly as detailed as the one that was drawn up for Meridian, just north of Oak, with that bulb out. If you can draw that striping plan, it's just a matter of dropping dots to where the bollards would go. So it's not intensive, or anyway. Yeah.
Oh, good. That's good to know. Okay, well, thank you both for that. There's cause for hope, so that's good. If there's nothing else on the COVID-19 front, we'll move on to item 6. Discussion of local return measure M projects, staff to provide updates. So my recollection is that we talked about this at our last meeting and put up a host of different ideas, and or it may have been even a couple of meetings ago, I can't recall. And staff was going to start looking into some of those. So Garrett, anything you want to fill us in on in that regard?
Yeah, so staff has reached out at different levels to San Marino for the projects on Garfield. And we have, although we've tried multiple times, multiple different ways, we have not heard anything. And I know in the past I was told that the San Marino was not amenable to working with the city of South Pasadena on those projects. So we'll keep, if it's the commission's wish, we'll keep plugging along. But that's the major part of the update. Let me look through my notes here.
So while you're looking, Garrett, I have an update to your update.
Okay, great.
So I spoke with Shahid, and he said that he had connected with San Marino.
Oh, good.
With regard to the proposed signal at the intersection of Garfield and Monterey, which is one of the original Measure M recommended projects. And he said they weren't wildly enthusiastic, those are my words, but that their suggestion was that we proceed with a warrant analysis and do the study, and that if the study came back that it was warranted, that they would take it back to their commission and council for recommendation. Because they have other priorities and other things they're looking at in that corridor, and this isn't necessarily one of them. But so anyway, the good news is they're open to it. We just need to provide the study that justifies it, and then they can move forward with it on their side. So just to update. Anything else, Garrett, from what we discussed last time?
No, unfortunately, due to all the staffing issues that are well documented, we're crawling along, but we're still moving.
Are you aware of, because Shahid much earlier during this meeting mentioned that it would be some time before we we're able to access the Measure M funds to do whatever the projects are that we end up all agreeing on, including council. Do you have a sense of when we have to have a list together to present to the Metro/Joint Powers Authority?
I don't have a good date for you. I know it's not super far away, but it's not like tomorrow either. Let me double check. Let me get in contact with Metro and just verify kind of what they're looking for in the other. Oh, my brain just turned off. What the COG or the
No,
Joint
Joint Powers,
that's what it. Yeah, the joint powers.
JVCPA,
Yeah, sorry. There's
and our council liaison, I think, is the city's representative on that. So
yeah.
if he were here, I would just ask him. But so so it sounds like we don't have to make any concrete, no pun intended, decisions tonight. Is that fair, Garrett?
Correct.
Okay. So in addition to what we discussed previously, to the extent any of us can remember that, does anyone have anything else that they want to bring up or discuss as a potential Measure M project? So I think I saw Commissioner Dunlap first, so I'll go with him and then Commissioner Fisher.
Thanks. Sorry, John. Sorry, Commissioner Fisher, to jump ahead. But yeah, I think that the two I brought up last time, the Huntington at Fremont, that would probably be a major project, or of the reconfiguration of that intersection. And I was even thinking, you don't need that channelized right turn lane, and so is there even an option to push that out to Huntington and make it more like a traditional intersection out in front of the Barclays? And then that frees up a lot of space, that you could use for a plaza or whatnot. We could brainstorm ideas on that. Also, a couple more that came to me this month that I was thinking about, like at Fremont at Monterey, the left turns back up Fremont Monterey Road, and so I don't know if the city would be supportive of
which left turns from where to where?
From Fremont onto Monterey Road.
Okay.
I don't know if the city would be supportive of or has looked into protected permissive left turn phasing there, like the doghouse left turn arrow. Some sort of study might need to be done. As well, another idea I was thinking about was on Stony Creek. When you go down to kind of the golf course, there's a curve there that has an equestrian crossing, and it's for the Arroyo Seco Trail, and you have a lot of runners on that trail too. And the way that crosswalk is kind of on that curve where that trail crosses, but there aren't any kind of enhancements there besides that crosswalk. So this probably wouldn't be a Measure M project, but even something like speed humps or something on there, or just some sort of warning to people crossing that crosswalk. And then
is there no signage? Nothing? There's something there, isn't there?
I think there's an advanced sign, like a horse crossing sign, but once you get to the crosswalk, there's one of those like an emergency beacon sort of thing. If you were going to have an emergency, that would, I guess, call the police. But I know you have a lot of runners and you have horses there. I mean, that's probably low on the priority list. But if you're thinking, if you're looking for ideas for projects, potentially some that are low cost to increase the number of projects, that's an idea. And I also don't want to lose track of, I know that staff recommended Diamond at Linden and what was it, Stony Creek at Arroyo in their previous report. And, the commission felt like adequate input wasn't received from that didn't really go through the process and going before the commission, and we didn't have a chance to provide input. And I also remember when we were going through the Ramona study and asking Shahid, like, hey, what was his ideal configuration at Diamond at Linden, he said that he didn't know. And so I was thinking like intersections like that, you really could pilot some sort of temporary flexible post or bollard and paint kind of configuration, in the curb extension space, or you could include some sort of art or some sort of placemaking type elements. And it really would give you a chance to evaluate that operation and the of those locations before going to Measure M and asking for a ton of money to do a bunch of concrete work. So I kind of wanted to just throw those out there as ideas, because I don't want to lose sight of, staff brought those up for a reason, and you probably received concerns about them, and you might have safety concerns, I'm not sure. But, really think about maybe that paint and bollard type configuration there, or something temporary that you can evaluate, and then hopefully that allows you to avoid any negative consequences that we've kind of experienced with the curb extensions on Fair Oaks. We might have wanted some sort of temporary configuration so we could see how it really affects the turning radius and traffic flow before we constructed it permanently.
So
Okay, great.
just to
Thank you.
confirm, Commissioner
Garrett.
Dunlap, you're talking about the crossing at Stony and Loman?
Yeah, Stony, let me pull it up. It's on the curve. Did I say, yeah, Stony? I said Stony Creek, but I meant Stony.
Okay.
Right before you get to the dog park.
Right. Yeah.
It's right where that fencing you and I have discussed is, Garrett.
No, I'm very familiar with it.
I don't know if that needs to be a Measure M project. I think that's probably, I don't know, a $10,000 project, but if you're looking for things, I can add to your list.
Yeah, another concern we had recently is that let me pull it up. I just want to make sure I'm getting the streets right. Is Arroyo at Pasadena. There's like a mid-block crossing that's in that area that we've done some short-term measures. We put shark teeth in and updated signage and put in a yield to pedestrians, but we're still getting some concerned residents about that crosswalk as well.
It's where?
It's on Pasadena near Arroyo. It's a kind of.
Is that the one that's right before the nature park?
Yeah.
Because I know you guys put the yield signs, the crosswalk indicator signs there, and I know people hit them.
Yes.
There's a lot of traffic there. I take that every day. So there's a lot of traffic on that. And there's a lot of people that are obviously speeding, and they're not slowing down for that.
Yeah.
So it's a crosswalk. It goes across Pasadena Avenue near Arroyo Drive.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of at the there's the slight right. If you're coming, I guess that's pseudo westbound on Pasadena.
It's almost literally where the drinking fountain is, right in front of the nature park. It's a little bit north of that.
Okay.
Is that the Al Manser Center?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anyone else with thoughts? Commissioner Fisher and then Hughes.
Yeah, Garrett, you've reached out or tried to reach out to the city of San Marino regarding the suggested traffic signal at Oak and Monterey. Another project that was identified early on by this commission was on Columbia Street at Fremont and Pasadena Avenue to restripe it so that you have a left turn lane on Columbia, one through lane in each direction, and right turn lanes onto Pasadena or Fremont. In addition, there was another proposed project just a little bit further west on Columbia at Orange Grove to install a left turn pocket on Columbia and revise the signal so that you have a protected or protected progressive westbound left turn arrow, because that is the majority move on Columbia, and the left turners are rather assertive in their left turn and don't always yield to the opposing eastbound through movement. Have you had any discussions with the city of Pasadena on those projects?
We did discuss Columbia with Pasadena. Shahid led the discussion with their team, and they're looking into it, and we meet with them monthly, and I believe we're scheduled on the agenda to get that update from them. So I would have more details next meeting for you.
Thank you.
That's great. And I'll note that one of the items we brought up, excuse me, last month, in response to the public comments, and there was some more tonight. I was just looking for my notes quickly, but regarding the issues on Orange Grove, south of Columbia. And I know we're going to get to that in a second, but several of the homeowners on and around that area have asked for a traffic study to evaluate the conditions, especially at the curve of Orange Grove, south of Columbia, and what measures could be implemented longer term to address the safety concerns there. So the traffic study itself is something that I think has been proposed to be able to be funded with Measure M funds. So Garrett, do you happen to have, because I don't think it's being reflected in the minutes, and I understand that's understandable, but like a running list of the various measures that have been proposed, like last meeting and now this meeting, so that we sort of know we're keeping track of all these things?
Yeah, I keep personal notes, and then like between the old staff reports that have the original proposed, I think when this commission was still the Public Works Commission, I think it goes that far back. And then the ones that staff
It
proposed.
does.
Yeah. So I have those reports, and then I have that on a list, and then I do take notes during, yeah, there you go. And then I do take notes. So yeah, there's a pretty comprehensive list that I need to organize better, but yeah, I do have it. And
so it would be great, you know, in your free time, if you have the ability, and it doesn't have to be pretty or anything, but if you had a way to just put it all together on a list so that we have it, maybe for the next meeting to just have to refer to, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, special or anything, but just, that would be great.
yeah, I can put together a running list, and it can just be a, you know, not a staff report, but it could just be a running list that we can refer to and kind of check off and reprioritize and, you know, work with at least.
Beautiful. Thank you. Commissioner Hughes.
I don't know if it would help, but I have the list that was done with the Measure M, Measure R projects that were put together in November of 2019. It had all the funding and everything. I don't know if it would help, again, this, Garrett, if this would help you at all.
Yeah, please, if send it, I can double check off it.
Okay. And
Thank you.
Add to it and subtract.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Commissioner Hughes. Okay, if there's nothing further on the M front, we'll go to Fremont Avenue projects. And I'm just making sure this is on our agenda every time to make sure we at least touch on it to know what, if anything, is happening with regard to the development of a list of projects to be implemented with the $6 million grant and potentially other funds. So Garrett, have there been any developments that we should be aware of?
Nothing too brand new, but you know, there is still some of the like the complete streets, and then I know we're looking to add the changeable message boards as part of that on, you know, tells you travel times. And I think that's going to go in with the Fair Oaks project, or part of, you know, it'll integrate with that project. So we'll have changeable message boards that say, you know, Fair Oaks 10 minutes to X, you know, 25 minutes to Y, or, you know, however far we can get the infrastructure built in. And then it'll say Fremont is, you know, whatever it is, to hopefully keep traffic on Fair Oaks and off Fremont. Let me 1 second here. Double
That's
check.
part of the Rogan
Yeah,
funded project, right?
right. As far as
Okay.
let me double check my.
I'm more this item. I'm was thinking less about Fair Oaks and the Fair Oaks related, Measure R type projects or Rogan projects, and more about Fremont specific projects, specifically those that would be funded with the grant. Because I know where we left off is the grant was awarded, which was fantastic. And then at some point there would be, I think Shahid mentioned, there would be some meetings with the Fremont Avenue residents to talk about measures that would be implemented with those funds. And I requested to be sure that members of this commission are included in being notified of those. And that's sort of what I was thinking of.
Yeah, and to keep things moving, I don't have any new notes for any of this stuff on Fremont. I think it's still pretty conceptual at this point, but we'll continue to provide updates.
Fantastic. Commissioner Dunlap.
Thanks, Chair. I do have a comment on the Fremont Complete Streets project. Once we get around to scoping, if you could just please request the collision data and provide maybe a summary of the collision data to us. I know just kind of checking other publicly available sources like UC Berkeley's TIMS database. I know that we have a history of collisions on Fremont ranging of all different degrees. And so I just want to make sure that in our discussions, we're data driven in them, and we can do everything we can to make it safer. So
Sure.
if you could include.
Do you want like an executive summary, or do you want?
No, not in the when we discuss it as a commission, that when the items presented to us, that there be a map possibly, and you could plot the collisions, maybe the ones that are fatal or severe injury, as well as ones that involve like pedestrians and bikes. I think is something that Chair Abelson kind of brought up last month. Every now and then, if we could be updated with some sort of summary on collision statistics, collision data, where are we at citywide? Have fatal and severe injuries gone up, or they gone down? Kind of what direction we're moving. That's what I do. I do that in my day-to-day, 40 hours a week. So I love looking into that sort of stuff. And I guess I don't have, I covet that sort of information from the city, and I think it could really help us inform our decision-making as well as like scoping and prioritizing projects.
Yeah, I definitely think as our staffing levels improve, we could maybe provide that quarterly. Depending on what we need, what we can and can't do. I'll double check with Shahid. But yeah, or
at least something like this before we really start scoping and identifying what we want to be a part of this project. Thanks.
Sounds good. All right. If there's nothing else on Fremont for now, we'll move right along to number 8, City Council Liaison Communications. Well, unless things have changed, I don't see Councilmember Primuth here. So we'll swiftly move along to items 9 and 10. Yeah, we'll just go with 9 now. So I'll just go around and ask folks if they have anything that they want to share in a couple of minutes. Commissioner Liu, anything?
Yeah, actually, over the past weekend, resident on Orange Grove, just south of Columbia, reached out to me. I have worked with Ann Rector professionally before on some Pasadena stuff, and she asks if I could look into merge ahead signs. And I did notice that the stretch of Orange Grove Boulevard southbound, just south of Columbia, does have a good number of signs about curves, speed limits, South Pasadena regulations, and and a neighborhood watch sign, but I didn't notice a merge ahead sign. So maybe that's something we can look at as kind of a near-term improvement. Maybe just, really improving the signage and the maybe merge pavement marking at that location instead of having the merge down at the curb. But we've talked about that to death, but that's just something I noticed. That's the only communication I had outside of what we've been over.
That's great. And I know Garrett will, I think, have some kind of a update in that regard in terms of suggested short-term improvements. So if it's all right, Garrett, I'll put a pin in it and then you can cover it in the staff report, your staff update.
I mean, I can do it now, or we can wait until.
Let's wait.
Okay, sure.
That's okay. Commissioner Dunlap, anything?
None at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Fisher?
None at this time.
Okay, great. Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick things. One, again, thanking everyone for their support of the UUT and the sales tax, because it really came out as they presented the budget, how much that helped the city through the pandemic, and what saving grace that was to the city financially. Also, I just wanted to say that I'd like to know, and Garrett, maybe it's again, and Chair Abelson, is that as we look forward, they obviously are setting the budget, even though we're getting close, and the new one after that, and want to be sure that the funding for the projects, I know we have the 5-year, 10-year, et cetera, but as we start looking, because we're going to be looking at, I'm assuming, our street improvements, and want to look at our funding sources and what we need for that and our priorities. So just kind of putting the feeler out there of where we are with those issues, and if we are feeling comfortable with the funding that's being allocated, and kind of recapping where we are with our projects.
Sure. So yeah, so we're currently working on the budget. This current fiscal year's budget, as we know, passed last council meeting. So
right,
super excited about that. And we've, before that, we've started to work on the next fiscal year budget, which entails the capital budget. So right now we're focused on the regular normal citywide budget, but very shortly after that, we will be looking at all the CIP projects and what funding we do have available for those projects. We do have, I think you guys, this commission saw it a while ago, was a payment management program report that you guys saw and received in file. So once the budgetary issues are done and we get some of these new staff members in place, we have that 5-year payment management plan that we're going to basically come to you all first with all those street segments and try to get it all approved and prioritized. And then with your recommendation, we'll go to council with those and ask for all the funding over that time period. And hopefully we can, with your guys' support, we can get all those street segments funded, because we have a lot of streets that are in design. We've got, I think, two years of backlogs of pavement programs that are, one design's almost done and one's, I think, 50 to 60% done. And then we're going to bid that as one big construction project, which will save us on mobilization and materials, because obviously the bulk and stuff is out there. And then we also do have some grant money for the rubberized pavement for the Cape Seals and stuff like that. So I'll have a better picture, maybe not next commission meeting, but the one after that, kind of where we're sitting. But we're definitely looking for this commission support moving forward with those payment management program projects.
That's great, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Is I remember that report, and I was looking at it the other day, because there was like 3 levels. There was like I want to call it a moderate level, a aggressive level, and a very aggressive level. Annual expenditures, and kind of figuring where's our numbers going to fit with being able to execute that, versus also where we are with our backlog projects in the 20, I think it was the 2018-19 year, and then the 19-20, so that we kind of get a full picture of the scope of what we're going to be touching upon as funding, and where that could be broken down into actual streets.
Yeah, so Yeah, so the street segments are still the street segments. Obviously, those are being designed that were approved from council previously. But that's the end of the previously approved street segments. So once we utilize the pavement management program to bring to you all the new street segment, then that will be what goes to council, and based on your priorities, hopefully they'll take those recommendations as well. So we can get these street projects funded. So
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. So a couple of really quick things. One, we have an ad hoc committee for the Ramona Avenue Neighborhood Traffic Management Plan. I believe that's Commissioner Fisher and myself. It was discussed previously. I will make sure that it's on our agendas going forward, just like the other ad hoc committees, so that we keep track of it and can check in every month. I know, as reported in the minutes, that we've already done some initial review, and Commissioner Fisher and I will be getting together at some point and put together a list of suggested recommendations for measures that can be readily implemented in the nearer term, and certainly before the new school year, hopefully. So I just wanted to note that, so that there's more to come. To the preferential parking policy plan that we discussed last month. I believe the way we left it was staff was going to be following up and looking into a few things, but that we had also agreed that commissioners, I think Dunlap and Liu, would sort of lead the charge in that regard. Does that sound correct? We didn't form a committee, but that you were sort of our point folks on that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I should have brought that up in communication. So Commissioner Dunlap and I have been doing our research and kind of digging into what our respective neighboring jurisdictions are doing with actual policy and the way it's written, and we'll be trying to glue that together and try to figure out how to give a good summary of it before maybe next month's meeting. So I think we should add preferential parking policy, but before we do want to send it to staff too, just to review if it makes sense to them, to even if it's something that would even be feasible to get their input on it before we bring it up at next month's meeting.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And
I'll add, I think some of what we're finding in our peer research is kind of what we talked about last month. It's really something that's a last resort, and after other parking measures have been exhausted, or other parking restrictions, whether that be time limit parking, those sorts of things. So we'll be happy to provide an update next month.
That's great. Thank you. And I believe it was one of the public comments. If not, it's something that somebody mentioned to me, and I thought it was a good idea that as part of this process, that whatever you all think is the appropriate time, that we set up a community meeting, hopefully live, when it's appropriate to do so, to hear specifically from the residents in our town who currently have preferential parking districts and what their experience has been. I think there have been some challenges, and there may be room for improvement. So that might be a good fact gathering mission as part of this, as we work towards developing a citywide policy. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And thank you for the work you've done already. And then Garrett, quick question for you there. And it seems that the city may even be doing something about it, but and I'm only mentioning it here because it involves questions regarding funding and such. There are a couple of locations, and Commissioner Fisher is well aware of at least one of them, on Arroyo Drive, I believe one is Arroyo Square and the other might be Columbia Street, but I may be getting that wrong. But there are a couple locations, like one's right near our city limit, where water collects and sits and sits and sits and sits. We've had this issue for a while, and it seems like something that we should be doing something about. And it's not just a small little puddle. I mean, it's a significant amount of water, and it just sits there. And it may just be a street repair issue. Curb and gutter. I'm not sure exactly what the remedy is, but I wanted to ask if you were aware of it, and if that's something that we can address, whether it's using existing maintenance or operational funding you have, or if there are funding sources available to us to deal with those types of problems and the problems that those problems can engender.
Sure. So if it's as simple as, the curb and gutter being in disrepair, we have funding for that that we can spend to fix those areas. What I can do is go out and look at it and have a better idea, because I'm not aware of those specific issues. I know we have some small ponding issues in other areas, but yeah, there's, and if it's not just the straight curb and gutter replacement, there's other kind of interesting things we can do with French drains and permeable pavement that can kind of help move water into, via storm drains and MS4 and stuff like that. So there's a lot of creative financing to solve some of these issues. It just depends on what's warranted. So I heard you say Arroyo and Arroyo Squared, and then maybe Arroyo up near Columbia. I can take a look at that next week.
That'd be great. Excuse me, and I can I'll shoot you a note if I've colossally messed up the locations, but I think that's where they are. So thank you for that. That's all I have. The last and final staff liaison communications, Rogan Fund project, and if you, Garrett, if you wouldn't mind starting with responding to, because I interrupted you earlier, Commissioner Liu's suggestion regarding Orange Grove south of Columbia.
Just making sure I'm not muted. Hold on. Yeah, so we, Tatovic and I have walked it, and we have a tentative design for some additional signage to short-term bring more awareness that the lane merges and that it is a sharp curve via, I don't know the number of the sign, but the one that, shows that the lane merges, and then the chevrons. And then we spoke with Pasadena, and they're amenable to help us place some signs in the parkway up further upstream to give people some more notice, because we can't get them all within our jurisdiction. So that's coming. The signs have been ordered. We're just waiting for them to get here. So they should be in shortly, hopefully a couple weeks.
And Garrett, did you say that there would be some pavement markings or as well as the signage?
I think we're going to put in some bot dots. I have to double check the plan, but I can't remember where exactly. I think just upstream of the merge to kind of just alert people. I think maybe a strip of 3 or 4 bot dots. I know the cyclists will hate us for it, but at least they'll be they'll kind of alert drivers, because I'm intimately familiar with that merge. I drive it every day.
Great. And any other updates you have for us?
Oh, sure. Let me just double check my notes here. So I think I'm slotted to give a Rogan Fund update. We have all of the, I think, just want to make sure I'm getting these projects correct. We have all the RFPs in. We've read through them. We have invited the top few candidates for interviews. And the way those interviews will be structured is they'll give a presentation, and then we have time for question and answer. And then from the results of those interviews, we'll select the candidate, and then we will take that to council for approval to move forward to award the contract. So we're moving right along. So
Okay, great.
making
And,
good progress.
Terrific. And I know we already got the a terrific update from Commissioners Dunlap and Liu on the Metro grant. And anything else in that regard? Or we?
No, they yeah, I double checked. I spoke with Margaret this morning, and she pretty much gave me the same update. So if Commissioners Dunlap and Commissioner Liu are speaking with Margaret, they're in the best hands possible for that project. So.
Okay, great. Any other updates from you or Leona, generally staffing wise or anything?
Sure. So the deputies are in works to have their start dates soon. So we're hoping sometime in May. I don't have that nailed down yet. So one's for water, one's for engineering, which would help with this commission. So as that gets closer, we'll probably have an introduction with that person and all of you. And then all the Earth Day celebrations are coming up. So I know this commission focuses on transportation, and that's also the environment, and carbon emissions is a big part of that. So we're doing a big kind of more online celebration, and due to the pandemic and everything, but it's still going to be a great celebration. So there's going to be a lot of really interesting blog posts on the City Scoop. So if you're not intimately familiar with that, please check it out. We got a lot of really great programs, and then I can tell you for next year, the staff and the NREC Commission have a lot of really great ideas they want to use as long as the world returns to more normal. So look forward to that, and that's all I have.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. I think we've reached the end of the agenda. So unless there's anything more, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Please,
to
somebody.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second.
Oh, I think the Commissioner Dunlap moved and Commissioner Liu seconded and Commissioner Hughes thirded. So we only take roll for this. So I'm assuming there is no objections. So thank you all for a very productive meeting. Sorry it went so long, especially the staff, but unfortunately, I guess you guys are used to it by now. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll consider this meeting adjourned. Have a great evening. Thank you all.